Chapter 461. The twins' inventive talent must have been inherited from their father, Ethan complimented. Mr. Weasley, I've heard that you once used magic to transform a rusty car into a flying car. Do you have any other inventions like this? Arthur immediately lit up upon hearing this, a proud smile spreading across his face. He opened his mouth, ready to reply with a yes, but then he caught himself, glancing guiltily at his wife. He winked at Ethan, amending his statement. Of course not. I haven't dabbled in those again. At that moment, Molly puffed up her chest, resembling a bullfrog. She fixed her husband with a stern gaze, seemingly on the verge of reprimanding him. However, upon realizing Ethan was still present, she held back her words. Clearly, the trouble Ron and Harry encountered at the beginning of their second year had left her with lingering fears, and she remained cautious about magical cars and similar inventions. Mr. Weasley, I've recently come up with a new plan, Ethan said, spreading his hands and his eyes shining with excitement. I'd like to apply to your department for the misuse of Muggle items to conduct research on Muggle television-related items. Once the renovation is complete, I plan to officially sell them. Our wizard radio is so outdated, it needs some innovation. TV set? Mr. Weasley asked. Curiosity piqued, his eyes widening. Is it the kind of Muggle box that can display images of people for a long time? If you don't exploit loopholes and sell it officially through legal channels, it might cost a lot of gold galleons. I mean, I didn't intentionally leave loopholes in the laws I wrote against the misuse of Muggle objects, he explained hurriedly, worried about being misunderstood. Ethan nodded with a smile, choosing to overlook Arthur's inadvertent admission. Galleons are not an issue for me. I would like to invite you to lead this Muggle item modification project. The compensation will be generous, and I'm sure you'll be satisfied. Upon hearing this, Arthur was visibly moved. Despite Percy's harsh words previously, they had highlighted issues he had been overlooking. Now he also realized that as a man, he needed to earn more for his family, but he wished to do so based on his own merits, not through charity from friends. Mr. Weasley, your extensive experience and deep connections within the Ministry of Magic will undoubtedly be invaluable for our Muggle TV renovation project, Ethan said in a formal tone, initiating the negotiation. I'm aware that advancing this project will involve navigating countless legal issues and procedures. In the entire magical world, I can't think of anyone more suitable to lead this project than you. With you at the helm, I'm confident that our project will progress smoothly and achieve unprecedented success. But Mr. Weasley, there's more to it than just the TV itself, Ethan continued, shifting the topic. The reason Muggle TV attracts so many viewers is not only because it can broadcast pictures and sounds. More importantly, there's a vast network of television stations behind it. These stations produce a variety of programs and then broadcast them to thousands of households through television signals. This is what we need to aim for. Ethan paused, finally revealing his ultimate goal. My plan is to start our own TV station in the wizarding world. This station will broadcast news, entertainment programs, educational films, and more from the wizarding world, allowing every wizard to learn about the wider world through TV. I believe this will be a major innovation in the wizarding world. He had discussed this idea with Jaina and others at the end of last year. At that time, they concluded it was feasible, but they would need to wait until their influence within the Ministry of Magic was more established. Ethan's project has reached a pivotal moment. With the annexation of Graham, Rauki's faction now controls half of the country, signaling it's time to set their ambitious plan into motion. Arthur, upon hearing this, couldn't hide his astonishment. The grandeur of the plan was beyond anything he had imagined. He recognized the project's complexity and risks, but also its profound significance. Ethan's initiative was not just groundbreaking, it aimed at deeper objectives, one of which was to dominate public opinion. In their initial discussions, it was clear that television, as an information dissemination medium, had superior publicity capabilities compared to newspapers and magazines. While a controversial magazine article might cause a temporary stir, it was insufficient for controlling the broader public opinion landscape. The Daily Prophet, though somewhat under their influence, was not entirely their own and had recently, under Fudge's direction, been criticizing Dumbledore and denying Voldemort's return. Ethan saw this approach as counterproductive, a short-term solution with long-term consequences. Voldemort's return was an undeniable fact, and his current concealment wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the truth would emerge, and the Daily Prophet's credibility would be shattered. Furthermore, Ethan aimed to use this platform to expose the wizarding world to the realities of Muggles, hoping to shock them into recognizing and exploring new magic. This goal, however, was not expected to be achieved overnight. To prevent backlash from conservative factions, Ethan planned a gradual approach. Initially, the programming would focus on wizarding life, magic learning, and adventures, designed to familiarize wizard audiences with this new information channel. Over time, as their influence and reputation solidified, Ethan intended to introduce content related to Muggle military and technology. This exposure would reveal the Muggle world's rapid technological advancements and military capabilities, prompting a sense of urgency among wizards. Ethan believed that facing the Muggle world's growing power, wizards would realize the need to continuously enhance their magical skills. Although traditional magic was versatile and profound, it lacked in areas such as mass destruction spells, large-scale environmental transformation, and in-depth exploration of specific magical aspects. Ethan's arcane magic system offered a solution, providing powerful spells that could reassure wizards in the face of Muggle challenges. This initiative mirrored the technological advancements during the Cold War, driven by a mix of fear, the unknown, and the pursuit of power. Breakthroughs and innovations in science and technology have always been pivotal, even in the wizarding world. Not everyone, however, shares the same zeal for advancing knowledge and power as the young wizards of the Erudite Society under Ethan's leadership. Essentially, all ambitious individuals at Hogwarts who sought higher levels of magical knowledge took the initiative to join the Erudite Society. But Ethan understood that to truly effect change in the wizarding world, relying solely on these individuals was insufficient. To mobilize the enthusiasm of a broader spectrum of wizards, a more impactful approach was necessary. He aimed to inspire wizards at large to realize that embracing a new era and pursuing more powerful magic was essential to address the challenges posed by the Muggle world. Moreover, Ethan had a far-reaching goal in mind: to win over members of the Order of the Phoenix. He didn't expect them to abandon Dumbledore and side with him outright. His aim was subtler: to sow seeds of doubt and create a favorable impression of his cause within Dumbledore's camp, or at least to foster dissatisfaction with Dumbledore. To achieve this, Ethan had already begun to lay the groundwork in secret. He skillfully stirred the tension between Sirius and Dumbledore, subtly driving a wedge between them. Indeed, there were many issues with Dumbledore's guardianship of Harry during his childhood. Recently, Ethan discovered another crucial piece of information. Sirius was deeply unhappy with Dumbledore's decision to use Harry as bait in the tournament. "However, I still have a job at the Ministry of Magic." Arthur finally spoke after a long silence, his voice tinged with hesitation and helplessness. On one hand, his family's financial situation was far from ideal. On the other, modifying Muggle items was not just a hobby but a passion for him. Ethan's proposal, therefore, was incredibly appealing. Moreover, the opportunity to engage in such a meaningful project while earning some money was an ideal scenario for him. Ethan smiled gently and reassured him. "Arthur, you can manage this project as a part-time job. As far as I know, the Department for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Items isn't overly busy on a regular basis. The schedule for this project is very flexible, and I'm confident you'll be able to complete it in your spare time." Hearing Ethan's words, Arthur's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Then, please, let's collaborate." He extended his hand and shook Ethan's firmly. "Thank you, Ethan. I fully support you. Let's work together to make this great project a reality." Chapter 462. After reaching a consensus on cooperation, Arthur Weasley eagerly took Ethan to visit his unique shed, brimming with various Muggle items he had magically transformed. "Look, Ethan, these are my babies," Arthur said, gesturing towards the disassembled Muggle items with a gleam of fanaticism in his eyes. "I find joy in tinkering with these objects, understanding their mechanics, and then infusing a bit of magic to make them even more fascinating." Unfortunately, not many in the wizarding world share my enthusiasm. Ginny, who had been following closely, chimed in with a soft voice. My dad is obsessed with Muggle artifacts. He loves to take them apart, enchant them, and then reassemble them. Sometimes I think if he were to search our house, he might end up arresting himself. She laughed at the thought. Ginny had only just come downstairs to join Ethan, having spent time applying makeup. Thanks to you, we don't have to worry about that for a while. Now he can legally study a TV, and Mum has no grounds to complain. Thank you so much, Ethan. George, standing nearby with his arm around Fred's shoulders, smiled and added, We're grateful too, Ethan. Thanks for convincing Mum, allowing us to chase our dreams. Ethan smiled, picking up a modified clock that no longer displayed time, but instead indicated the whereabouts of his family members. He examined the unique clock with interest and remarked, I decided to invest because I saw potential and passion in you. This is to ensure a maximum return on the investment, so feel free to dive into your research. After the tour, the Weasley family warmly invited Ethan to stay for dinner and overnight, but he politely declined. He had many tasks to attend to and needed to bid the Weasley family farewell. Before leaving, Ethan handed Arthur another hefty bag of gold galleons to support his research. Mr. Weasley, I hope this contribution aids your research. I'm confident your talent and passion will lead to remarkable discoveries. Then, turning to Ginny with a wink, he added, Ginny, don't forget to find time for training at the tower. As Ethan's figure vanished into the distance, George remarked, Dad, it seems we've not only failed to repay Ethan, but have also accepted a larger grant from him. The family exchanged looks, falling into a brief silence until Ron, wearing a patched housecoat to avoid embarrassment in front of Ethan, broke the quiet. This money. Arthur solemnly passed the purse to his wife, Molly, who with a smile suggested buying Arthur some new clothes first. Ron couldn't help but smile bitterly. What bad luck. If only Ethan had come to collaborate with Dad a year earlier, I wouldn't be stuck wearing this antique. After parting ways with the Weasley family, Ethan didn't head straight home, but instead chose to stroll through Ottery St. Catchpole, making his way to Luna's house, the peculiar dwelling on the hillside. Approaching the courtyard door, Ethan's gaze was drawn to the hand-painted sign, unmistakably in Luna's unique, artistically whimsical style. The sight brought a slight smile to his face, thinking of Luna's charming and innocent nature. Gently pushing open the creaking gate, he followed the winding path lined with an array of bizarre plants, each step bringing him closer to the heart of Luna's world. One of the bushes was filled with orange-red, radish-shaped fruits known as blimp plums, which Luna sometimes fashioned into earrings. Guarding both sides of the front door were two tall, old crabapple trees adorned with light pink flowers. These flowers clustered together like pink clouds, filling the air with their enchanting fragrance. Ethan remembered the reminder about the door number, so he carefully picked a bouquet of mistletoe flowers, their white beads decorating a large bush. Holding the bouquet, he continued along the path until he reached the heavy black door, its surface punctuated by iron round nails and an eagle-shaped door knocker, lending it an ancient and mysterious air. At that moment, Luna and her father, Mr. Zeno Phileas Lovegood, stood at the door, deep in conversation. Luna, in a long dress the color of begonia flowers, seemed to merge into the surrounding sea of flowers. Her long golden hair was adorned with a bouquet of white mistletoe flowers, perfectly complementing her appearance. She immediately noticed Ethan's arrival, a hint of surprise flashing in her eyes. Xenophilius, standing opposite Luna with a pirate hat and his beard pointing upwards like a thrush's beak, seemed oblivious to the new arrival. I've got 2 tickets for the performance of the famous witch singer Celestine Warbeck, he announced, his beard curling up in pride. You can choose any day, Saturday or Sunday. Luna tilted her head, a thoughtful expression on her face. That's great, Dad. It means you can watch it twice in a row. Ethan coughed deliberately, the sound echoing in the quiet courtyard, drawing Xenophilius's attention. Mr. Ethan Green? Xenophilius expressed his surprise, not expecting Ethan's visit. Good afternoon, Mr. Lovegood, Ethan greeted with a smile, his gaze shifting between Luna and Xenophilius. I have something I'd like to discuss with you in detail. Upon hearing this, Xenophilius grasped the door knocker and forcefully opened the heavy door. Ethan followed him into the Lovegood house, entering the living room, which also served as Mr. Lovegood's workshop. The room left a lasting impression on Ethan, reminiscent of the unforgettable Room of Requirement at Hogwarts, albeit on a much smaller scale. It was filled with all manner of oddities, treasures collected by Xenophilius over the years. The dangerous horn Luna had once called a curved-horned Snorlax was actually a Venomhorn's horn, and the strangely decorated Ravenclaw bust still stood on the cluttered cabinet. Books and papers littered every available space, and exquisite animal models hung from the ceiling, their wings flapping or mouths moving. A new addition since Ethan's last visit was a photo wall adorned with pictures of magical creatures, most captured by Luna in Hogwarts' Forbidden Forest. Ethan's gaze was drawn to a particular photo. The photo of Ron and Clum kissing. You've actually framed it at home, he remarked, dumbfounded. Ron would be furious if he saw this. Luna simply smiled, a mischievous glint in her eyes, clearly proud of her prank. After admiring the photo wall, Ethan settled onto a soft sofa, perfectly positioned to overlook the flower bed outside. The small garden, meticulously tended by Luna, was a riot of color. Honeysuckles and morning glories covered the flower stand, their blooms dancing in the wind like a living painting. Tall white lilies stood gracefully, swaying gently in the breeze and releasing a delicate fragrance. Luna took a seat on the sofa opposite Ethan, the light from the garden casting a serene glow over the scene. Ethan began to prepare tea with his own hands. His movements were skillful and graceful, and bursts of fragrance wafted from the shade of flowers behind him, intertwining with the aroma of the tea to create an extremely elegant atmosphere. This warm ambiance was truly intoxicating. Ethan calmed down, adjusted his sitting posture to appear more serious, and addressed Xenophilius. Mr. Lovegood, your extensive experience and outstanding abilities in the media field of the wizarding world are well known. In the past few years, under your leadership, the Quibbler has evolved from a niche magazine into a mainstream media outlet, with sales volumes second only to those of the Daily Prophet. I greatly admire your talent and vision. Since he was seeking assistance, Ethan tactfully omitted any mention of the help provided by others and continued, I am now planning to launch a wizarding TV station, aiming to bring a more vibrant audio-visual experience to the wizarding world. I sincerely invite you to serve as the director of the TV station. With your guidance and leadership, I believe our programming will be embraced throughout the wizarding world. Thank you so much for your trust and invitation, Ethan. Mr. Lowe, Vigud responded, stroking his beard thoughtfully. However, I must admit that I am not familiar with the field of television. Newspapers, magazines, and TV stations might seem like completely different realms. I've never even been exposed to this medium before. He expressed his uncertainty and wondered if he was qualified for this new role. Moreover, the Quibbler had been his labor of love and pride for many years, and he was not ready to relinquish it easily. The narrative then shifts to Luna, Chapter 463. Lovegood put it mildly, but Ethan could clearly discern his subtle thoughts through his psychic powers. Thus, he immediately devised a plan to persuade him. I will provide details of Muggle television stations, as well as some videotapes of their popular programs. Ethan gently alleviated Mr. Lovegood's concerns. You just need to use these as a reference, and then proceed to create something unique. I believe that with your creativity and talent, you will be able to craft a program that is distinctly for the wizarding world. He took a sip of the black tea Luna had made and continued. In fact, television is still a relatively new concept for wizards, so as long as the initial program isn't terribly executed, it's very likely to succeed. However, he cautioned, of course, this means your responsibilities will increase. After all, the Quibbler also requires your attention, and you'll need to manage both. Upon hearing that he wouldn't need to abandon the Quibbler, Mr. Lovegood's eyes sparkled with joy. That's not an issue. I'm not afraid of hard work. As long as it's a project I'm passionate about, I'll dedicate myself fully to it. I think many of your articles in the Quibbler are quite unique and could be even more engaging if adapted into a TV show, Ethan suggested. We could call it Into the Magic, or Exploration and Discovery, or something similar. Muggles have similar TV programs as well. After Ethan's introduction, Mr. Lovegood showed great interest. However, he soon broached another topic. There's another matter I'd like to discuss. The Quibbler has been quite aggressive recently in criticizing Fudge for denying Dumbledore's declaration of Voldemort's return. I understand this is in the spirit of journalism, but the timing isn't right. We need to be more cautious to avoid causing unnecessary trouble. Ethan saw Mr. Lovegood's dissatisfaction and quickly clarified, "This doesn't mean we should abandon our pursuit of the truth. We can continue to gather evidence of Voldemort's return and subtly hint at relevant signs to prepare the ground for future reports. But let's not directly link these signs to Voldemort just yet to avoid causing panic." He then assured Mr. Lovegood, "Don't worry, this situation won't last forever. Gianna and I will keep working at the official level. When the time is right, we'll reveal the truth together. That will be the perfect moment for the Quibbler to surpass the Daily Prophet as the leading media outlet." Although still somewhat reluctant, Mr. Lovegood eventually agreed to this compromise. Seeing Mr. Lovegood's nod of agreement, Ethan felt a weight lift from his heart. Yet, with the next request on his mind, he approached the topic with caution. "Mr. Lovegood, there's one more thing. I'd like to invite Luna to my home for a period of magical training, if you agree." Before Ethan could finish, Luna stood up eagerly, exclaiming, "Let's go!" She didn't give her father a chance to respond and quickly pulled Ethan by the hand, leading him out the door. Mr. Lovegood, taken aback by Luna's sudden action, was left speechless, eventually sighing as he looked down at the 2 concert tickets in his hand. Upon arriving home, Ethan was immediately confronted by Hermione. "Did you go out just now?" Hermione had arrived early for the holidays and seemed less interested in the stable life at home, choosing instead to visit Ethan daily. This prompted Mr. Granger to express a sentiment similar to Mr. Lovegood's. "Yes, I just ran some errands and stopped by the Weasleys' house," Ethan replied calmly. "New love, right?" Hermione's tone carried a hint of sourness. As Ginny matured, Hermione's sense of rivalry with her intensified. The news of Ethan visiting the Weasleys' house always stirred a wave of indescribable jealousy within her. Ethan offered a bitter smile and stepped forward, attempting to comfort Hermione with a hug, which she skillfully dodged. "Mrs. Weasley invited me. I don't have that kind of interest," he quickly clarified. "Besides, my visit as to discuss serious matters with Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, specifically about television." Just then, Luna's clear voice interrupted from outside. "Ethan, Ethan, why are all your nymphs hiding from me?" As she entered their view, she noticed Hermione blocking the door, greeted her with a smile, and "Hello, Hermione." Hermione nodded in response, her gaze fixed on Ethan, as if questioning his earlier statement about not pursuing any girls. "Didn't we agree to let them come for training during the summer vacation?" Ethan said with a smile, pulling out a delicate paper bag from his pocket and handing it to Hermione. "This is a small gift I bought for you. I hope you like it." Hermione curiously peeked to the paper bag, then quickly looked away, trying to maintain a neutral expression. "What is it?" she asked, a hint of anticipation in her voice that she herself might not have noticed. "You'll see when you open it," Ethan replied with a mysterious smile, enjoying the suspense. Unable to contain her curiosity, Hermione hesitantly opened the paper bag, glanced at its contents, and then quickly closed it again. "I don't like it," she stated flatly, suspecting Ethan was teasing her about gaining weight. However, Ethan could sense her underlying excitement and felt a surge of happiness at her awkward reaction. "May I offer you a taste?" he suggested, picking up the ice cream from the paper bag and moving towards Hermione with a smile. Just then, Gwen passed by. Ethan called out to her, "Gwen, please find Zhang Chu and tell her I've brought desserts for everyone." "Okay, master," Gwen responded with a slight bow before departing. Turning back to Hermione, Ethan offered the ice cream to her. "Come on, have a taste," he urged gently. Hermione initially turned away, but after Ethan's persistent coaxing, hesitantly opened her mouth and accepted the spoon. The sweetness of the ice cream lit up her eyes. "How's the taste?" Ethan asked, smiling. "Try it yourself," Hermione responded, scooping up a spoonful of ice cream and offering it to Ethan. "Yeah, it's really sweet," he agreed. "It's refreshing to have this in summer." Suddenly, Luna appeared, eyeing the ice cream in Ethan's hand with anticipation. "Boyfriend, I want some too," she exclaimed, resembling a baby bird eagerly awaiting food. Luna, usually oblivious to romantic nuances, had a knack for instinctively engaging in provocative actions. "Of course, there's some for you," Ethan assured, offering Luna a spoonful of ice cream from the same spoon he and Hermione had shared. Luna accepted it without hesitation. Hermione observed their interaction with a mix of annoyance and resignation. Despite being accustomed to such situations, she couldn't help feeling a twinge of discomfort now and then. Seeking to recapture Ethan's attention, she too asked for ice cream. After a while of playfully feeding each other ice cream while seated comfortably on the soft sofa, Ethan steered the conversation towards work. "Hermione, how's your research on the TV station going?" Hermione's expression turned to one of slight confusion. "Well, she has always wanted to collaborate with Ethan on some projects. However, she quickly realized that the research and development work at the TV station was far more complex than she had anticipated. The project spanned several areas with which she was unfamiliar, leaving her feeling somewhat overwhelmed. And while Zhangchu's proficiency in alchemy was commendable, it didn't seem to offer much assistance with this particular challenge. Perhaps if Ethan dedicated some time to meticulously studying the TV station, he might achieve progress more swiftly than they could together. Ethan has been deeply engrossed in researching advanced magic lately, aiming to elevate his wizarding level and prepare for the impending upheaval in the magical world. He has delegated the construction of the TV station to Hermione and the task of transforming the TV to Mr. Wei Sly. Faced with limited energy, he had to prioritize. Under normal circumstances, Hermione would have insisted on studying alongside Ethan, employing whatever means necessary to involve him. A saying from the world of A Song of Ice and Fire goes, "Chaos is a ladder." With the magical world on the brink of turmoil, Ethan is seizing this chance to elevate their power to new heights. Aware of the importance of his current endeavors, Hermione knows she shouldn't distract him, leaving her no choice but to forge ahead on her own, despite the challenges. Chapter 464. "Ethan, are there any new changes in the situation outside?" Hermione asked casually while enjoying the food her boyfriend fed her. "Is the Daily Prophet still launching a fierce attack on Professor Dumbledore?" "Yes, the reports have been overwhelming, but that's what we expected," Ethan replied. He then took out a dessert from his bag and offered it to Hermione. "Don't worry about that nonsense. Here, try this." "Wow, cream puffs! You even bought these?" Hermione's eyes sparkled with delight. Ethan smiled proudly. "Delicious, isn't it? Luna spotted these immediately when we visited a Muggle dessert shop. They're quite popular, and not just with the girls. I enjoy them too, but I appreciate their symbolic meaning even more." Hermione took another bite, then offered a puff to Ethan. "You should try it too." Ethan took a bite, savoring the dense texture and sweet cream, then pointed to the other end of the puff, saying vaguely, "Don't let the cream spill out." Seeing this, Hermione pouted and leaned closer. "Really, why are you so playful?" Despite her words, she covered the almost leaking puff with her mouth, her face flushing with a happy blush. She didn't mind these overly intimate actions. In fact, she liked them because they felt like expressions of love. "What did you buy?" At that moment, Zhangchu entered the hall. The intimate scene before her made the smile on her face freeze. Ethan, unfazed by Zhangchu's arrival, greeted her warmly. "Zhangchu, come, look at the delicious food I've bought." He offered her a cream puff. "Luna and I found these in a dessert shop in the village. They're called cream puffs. Taste great." Luna chimed in, "Yes, they're really delicious." She seemed to sense the awkward atmosphere and attempted to alleviate it with the allure of tasty food. "Is this a Muggle dessert? I've never had it before," Zhangchu asked softly, trying to shift her focus. Her reluctance to live with everyone stemmed from frequently encountering Ethan in intimate moments with other girls, which always left her feeling extremely embarrassed. However, her mood improved with the first bite of the cream puff, the creamy texture and sweet cream delighting her senses. "Yes, it's a delicacy from the Muggle world," Ethan said, then took out a box of ice cream from the paper bag, offering it to Zhangchu. "This is matcha-flavored ice cream. I thought you might like this flavor." Zhangchu tasted the ice cream, the fragrance of matcha and the smoothness of the ice cream blending perfectly. Muggles really do know how to enjoy life. During her time with Ethan, she had come to appreciate the finer aspects of Muggle cuisine. I also bought some eggs, milk, and other ingredients, Ethan added thoughtfully. If you like ice cream, you can ask Gwen and Oriana to make some fresh for you. Though, it's best to enjoy these treats in moderation to avoid gaining weight. Zhang Chu glanced at Ethan, a slight smile on her lips. I exercise with Cirilla every morning, but you don't seem to do much exercise yourself. As she said this, she took another bite of the cream puff, then gracefully licked the cream from the corner of her mouth. The seductive movement made Ethan's heart race, and he half-jokingly thought about how he'd love to envelop her in cream puff too. I don't need to exercise, he managed to say, suppressing his rising emotions. I can maintain my figure through transformation. I dare say my body is better than 99% of wizards. Despite the looming shadow of Voldemort's return over the wizarding world, Ethan seemed to find moments of lightness and joy, sharing simple pleasures with his friends. Ethan, choosing to live a leisurely life, spends his days immersed in the vast ocean of magic research, or in the company of Zhang Chu and Hermione, discussing love and sharing insights. His life is filled with contentment. However, this doesn't mean he is oblivious to the happenings of the wizarding world. Over the years, Ethan has developed a network of informants that keep him well informed about the dynamics and subtle shifts within the wizarding community. Percy, keeping a watchful eye on Fudge, reports any disturbances directly to Ethan. He also has plans in place to monitor Voldemort's movements closely, with undercover agents on high alert. As for Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix, Ethan has several acquaintances within who, albeit unwittingly, provide him with valuable information about the Order's activities, ensuring he is always one step ahead. For instance, Hagrid, the enthusiastic half-giant, is an open book when it comes to intelligence gathering. A few letters from Ethan inquiring about his well-being are enough for Hagrid to divulge information about Dumbledore's plans without any need for persuasion. Recently, Ethan received another letter from Hagrid, filled with excitement and poorly scribbled words that conveyed his inner happiness. "Ethan, guess what?" Hagrid wrote, sharing news of his progressing relationship with Mrs. Maxim. They had been assigned a mission by Professor Dumbledore, which Hagrid romantically described as a date. Aware of being monitored by the Ministry of Magic, Mrs. Maxim cleverly suggested they disguise their mission as a vacation. Enthralled by the idea, Hagrid agreed, and they chose to travel on foot, pretending to visit the Beauxbatons Academy of Magic in France. They managed to elude their follower in the scenic city of Dijon. In subsequent letters, Hagrid detailed their journey through several countries, including Germany, Poland, Belarus, and finally Russia, where they prepared to venture into the Caucasus Mountains. Although Hagrid didn't explicitly state their mission, the locations he mentioned and a recent plan discussed by Dumbledore and Fudge made their objective clear to Ethan. They were headed to a hidden settlement of giants in the Morvan Mountains, a task Dumbledore would only assign to 2 half-giants. Meanwhile, in the dimly lit study of Malfoy Manor, Lucius Malfoy sat at his ornate desk, penning a letter to Jaina with a sense of urgency. "Dear Lady Jaina Proudmoore," he began, revealing that he had received orders from Voldemort, who had not forsaken him despite suspicions of betrayal. The Dark Lord's request for a significant amount of money and supplies, along with instructions to persuade the giants in the Dijon Mountains alongside other Death Eaters, weighed heavily on Lucius. He paused, contemplating his next words, ensuring privacy before continuing his correspondence. Ethan's intervention had significantly weakened Voldemort's power. At the World Cup, the new Aurors, under Ethan's leadership, had successfully apprehended numerous Death Eaters and their potential allies. Moreover, during the final match of the Triwizard Tournament, Ethan showcased his prowess by eliminating a cadre of Voldemort's skilled followers. "The current situation is highly unfavorable to him," Lucius wrote. He explained that Voldemort, in desperate need of new forces, was willing to forgive those followers who had been disloyal, as well as dark magical creatures and magical races traditionally hostile towards wizards. Lucius mentioned that, in addition to giants, there were plans to recruit Dementors. This letter, initially intended for Gianna, also found its way into Ethan's hands. The information matched what Hagrid had shared, leading Ethan to surmise that Dumbledore had likely received similar intelligence from Snape. This would have prompted Dumbledore's earlier suggestion to Fudge. However, Fudge's rejection compelled Dumbledore to seek alternative solutions, eventually assigning Hagrid and Madame Maxime to handle the matter with the Giants. Upon learning this, Ethan resolved to investigate the situation in the Morvan Mountains himself. He retrieved Hagrid's letter and, using it, activated the advanced detection spell to pinpoint Hagrid's location accurately. Accompanied by Oriana as his assistant, Ethan opened a portal directly to Hagrid's vicinity near Yekaterinburg. Upon arrival, he employed the advanced invisibility spell and discreetly followed Hagrid and Maxime, moving unseen like shadows. Chapter 465. This time, Ethan gained a profound understanding of the time-sensitive nature of wizard communication through owls. When he received Hagrid's letter, it was already the second day after it had been sent. By the time he hurried to Hagrid's side, they had already ventured deep into the vast Ural Mountains. The silhouettes of two hybrid giants loomed ahead. Despite their swift pace, it was not difficult for Ethan, with his druid abilities, to keep up. He moved effortlessly through the woods and mountains, feeling nature's guidance with every step. The land ahead seemed to communicate with him, with weeds and thorns parting to clear his path. Walking in the wilderness, Ethan felt as though he had returned home. It was summer, but as they delved deeper into the mountains, the temperature dropped, and traces of snow became visible. After scaling a tall ridge, they finally spotted the giants' location. These majestic beings moved slowly in the valley below, resembling moving hills. "Olim, we need to conceal our magic," Hagrid said, turning to Mrs. Maxim and subtly gesturing towards the glowing wand in her hand. Mrs. Maxim, slightly taken aback, quickly understood Hagrid's implication. With a light wave of her wand, she extinguished the dancing lights. Darkness enveloped them, with only the faint glow of starlight illuminating the ground. She nodded slightly and smiled at Hagrid. "I will always remember Dumbledore's warning. That mysterious man is also after the giants, and he might have sent an envoy. We must be extremely cautious and not reveal our location in case Death Eaters are nearby." "I understand, Hagrid." She gracefully adjusted her crooked black velvet hat, maintaining her dignified posture regardless of the situation. The two exchanged glances, their focus returning to the giants ahead. Mrs. Maxim sighed. "They are so tall." Hagrid shrugged, feeling for the first time that his height was a disadvantage. Compared to the giants, who were generally over 6 meters tall, he felt diminutive. Yet the courageous Hagrid had no intention of retreating. Just as he was about to take a step forward, Mrs. Maxim gently held him back. "For our safety, approaching the giants now may not be wise." Worry flickered in her eyes. Hagrid nodded in agreement, understanding that playing the hero was not prudent at this moment. Entrusted with such an important task by Dumbledore, he couldn't betray that trust. Moreover, he didn't want to appear reckless and careless in Mrs. Maxim's eyes. In the shadowy night, Ethan quietly followed Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim, overhearing their plans to wait until morning to approach the giants. He turned slightly, whispering to Oriana, who was concealed in the darkness, "Keep watching them and report any movement to me immediately." Then, he decided to alter his strategy and first visit the surrendered Lucius Malfoy. As part of his surrender, Ethan had cast a secret positioning spell on Lucius. This rune, far less conspicuous than the Death Eater mark, acted like an invisible shackle, allowing Ethan to track his movements at all times. This was crucial not only for undercover work, but also to ensure Lucius's loyalty. Guided by the locating rune, Ethan easily pinpointed Lucius's location. He took a deep breath, teleported nearby, then activated the invisibility technique, and cautiously approached. At that moment, Lucius was sitting expressionlessly at the base of a huge tree, holding a dry sandwich in one hand and occasionally sipping brandy from the flask he carried, trying to ward off the cold. In his body, the thin man walking beside him, the tall, Death Eater McNeil, stood on a boulder, surveying the area below the ridge with a cautious eye. At that moment, a mysterious voice echoed in Lucius's heart. "Lucius, I'm Ethan Green. I am communicating with you through psychic link. Please relax and do not attempt to resist with occlumency." The voice caused a slight tremor in Lucius's heart. He casually set aside the sandwich he was holding, feigning nonchalance as he scanned his surroundings. Despite his efforts, there was no sign of Ethan. "Lucius, there's no need for concern. They won't be able to find me," Ethan reassured. "Your primary objective now is to swiftly complete Voldemort's mission of recruiting giants and then leave this dangerous place as soon as possible." Lucius let out a soft sigh and frowned. "But McNeil, who accompanies me, is quite belligerent. He has proposed attacking Hagrid multiple times. He expressed his concern. If he acts on this and we return empty-handed, I fear the Dark Lord will grow suspicious of me. I've already taken this into account. Just concentrate on recruiting the giants and leave the rest to me. If McNeil insists on attacking Hagrid, let him. I will secretly assist Hagrid while ensuring McNeil survives to report back to Voldemort," Ethan said, his voice brimming with confidence. "This will demonstrate to the Dark Lord that you were right. By proceeding with caution, you not only successfully completed your mission, but also avoided unnecessary conflict. The Dark Lord will know whom to trust," Ethan explained, a hint of surprise appearing in Lucius's eyes. "You mean you'll assist me covertly?" "Exactly," Ethan confirmed. "I'll ensure your safety during the mission and also create an opportunity for you to gain favor with Voldemort. This will help you regain his trust, infiltrate the inner circle of Death Eaters, and gather more information for us. However, this requires your full cooperation." "Please, give me your instructions, Lord Ethan," Lucius said earnestly, ready to follow Ethan's plan. "Lucius, listen carefully," Ethan began. "Next, I want you to caution McNeil again and urge him to act prudently. Make sure your warning is heard by everyone. Let them all bear witness. Afterwards, prioritize bringing the giant back. Leave McNeil and his group to me." Ethan paused, seemingly in thought, before continuing. "You must understand, it's not only the Dark Lord and Dumbledore who are interested in the giants. They are crucial to me as well. Initially, I planned to control them directly, but since you've come forward with this information and proven your value as an undercover agent, I'm willing to compromise. I will allow you to successfully recruit some giants to fulfill Voldemort's task. This is the concession I'm prepared to make, and I hope you appreciate this opportunity." Hearing Ethan's words, a wave of warmth flooded Lucius's heart. When he first betrayed Voldemort and reached out to Jaina, he was plagued by anxiety and fear, worried he would be discarded after serving his purpose. But now it was clear that both Jaina and Ethan were dependable allies. Thus, Lucius responded with determination. "Please rest assured, I will seize this opportunity and do everything in my power to complete the mission." After receiving Lucius's firm commitment, Ethan nodded in satisfaction, then turned his attention back to Oriana. As Ethan observed through the monitor of the scout robot sent by Oriana, he saw Hagrid and Mark beneath a tree. Mrs. Sim, also known as Mrs. Maxim, appeared unfazed by the harsh surroundings. She reclined gracefully on Hagrid's slightly worn leather jacket, as if it were the softest feather bed. Her head rested on Hagrid's sturdy thighs, and with a trustful ease, she closed her eyes, drifting into a serene slumber. Hagrid gazed at her with an expression filled with adoration. He gently lifted his large hand and carefully stroked her hair with a tenderness that seemed boundless. Ethan couldn't help but think, somewhat amused, that he never expected to witness such a moment with Hagrid. Wishing not to intrude on this peaceful scene, Ethan moved silently through the trees, eventually alighting softly atop a majestic Siberian spruce. This particular Siberian spruce towered over 40 meters high, making it possibly the tallest tree in the forest and offering Ethan a strategic vantage point. From this height, he could survey the entire landscape below the ridge. His gaze then shifted across the treetops to the chaotic giant camp nestle D under the ridge. There, he observed countless enormous figures sprawled on the ground in various poses. Their sleeping positions varied widely. Some stretched out freely, limbs extended. Others curled into a ball, seemingly in search of comfort, while some huddled together for warmth. The sleeping arrangements of these giants offered a glimpse into their level of civilization. The older giants, their skin etched with the passage of time, seemed to value comfort more than the younger, more robust giants. They didn't just lie on the bare ground, but used thick layers of thatch and animal skins as makeshift beds. Their attire also leaned more towards human civilization, unlike the younger giants who opted for minimal clothing, barely covering themselves and leaving much exposed to the chilly winds. The snoring of the giants was deafening, reverberating through the valley like thunder. Just before dawn, this thunder even caused a minor avalanche. Snowflakes cascaded down the mountain like a silver waterfall, creating white plumes around the giants. Yet, this disturbance did not seem to interrupt their peaceful slumber. Chapter 466. As dawn broke, the morning light sifted through the trees like fine sand, casting the entire forest in a soft golden hue. Madame Maxime, under this gentle illumination, meticulously adjusted her attire. She tilted her head, deliberately avoiding Hagrid's gaze. A pair of blushes bloomed on her cheeks, creating a peculiar contrast with her towering stature. Her height seemed at odds with such a girlish display of emotion, yet Hagrid found it endearing. Once her appearance was restored to its usual elegance and poise, Madame Maxime retrieved a piece of Gubrathian fire from the delicate bag she carried. She handed it to Hagrid, who accepted it with a blink, held it aloft, and together they descended the mountain side by side. Ethan watched from a higher vantage point, his gaze piercing through the leafy canopy to lock onto their target, the giant leader, Gugo. Gugo, in the giant tongue, signifies a leader. This particular giant resided in a valley cradled by 4 mountains, near a serene mountain lake. Gugo towered above his kin, standing at an imposing height of 12 or 13 feet, with a mass rivaling that of 2 bull elephants. His skin was as tough as rhinoceros hide, and his temperament was notably irritable and lethargic. At that moment, Carcass, seated on the ground, bellowed orders for the other giants to prepare food for him and his wife, including dead sheep. His voice, thunderous and commanding, reverberated through the valley, sending shivers down the spine of anyone within earshot. As Hagrid and Madame Maxime made their way down the slope, Hagrid, with the Gubrathian fire held high, kept his eyes fixed on Carcass, disregarding the others. The surrounding giants, initially unsettled by Carcass's roaring, fell silent upon witnessing the duo's approach with a gift. They watched in quiet anticipation as Hagrid and Madame Maxime reached Carcass's feet and bowed deeply. Hagrid carefully placed the Gubrathian fire on the snow before Carcass, clearing his throat before announcing, "This is a gift from Albus Dumbledore to the giant leader Gugo, as a token of our deep respect." Carcass eyed the small flame with confusion, prompting the summoning of 2 elder giants who had lived among humans and spoke English fluently. They translated Hagrid's message for Carcass and elaborated on the magic of the Gubrathian fire. It could burn eternally without extinguishing. The revelation excited the gathered giants, who cheered and crowded around to witness the magical flame. This underscored a poignant reality about giants. Despite their formidable strength, their simplicity and lack of basic skills like fire-making made them highly value such gifts. Seizing the moment, Hagrid announced, "Albus Dumbledore has instructed me to inform you that another messenger will visit tomorrow with more gifts. We request that Gugo grant us an audience then." The decision to postpone a direct conversation with Gugo wasn't taken lightly. Dumbledore had advised a gradual approach to demonstrate their sincerity and reliability. Presenting another gift the following day would not only reinforce their trustworthiness, but also allow the giants time to assess the gift's value and significance, potentially increasing their eagerness for more. Aware of the giant's straightforward yet volatile nature, Hagrid and Madame Maxime opted for caution, bowing to Gugo once more before retreating to their camp. They found a small cave nearby to serve as a temporary shelter and settled in for the night. As darkness enveloped the forest and stars twinkled overhead, they were preparing dinner when a giant translator unexpectedly arrived, bearing surprising news. Gugo had decided to host a grand hall. The welcome banquet was a gesture of respect and friendship held under the night sky. Bonfires blazed within the giants' camp, casting warm glows on their faces and creating a cozy atmosphere for the dinner party. Huge grills and pots were set atop the bonfires as the giants prepared for their feast. However, most giants lay lazily on the ground, leaving the interval in preparation to the shorter male giants who skillfully handled the ingredients. They chopped wild onions, pounded wild garlic, peeled chestnuts, and diced wild boar with ease. though their efforts were met with contempt from the others due to their lower status within the tribe. An old giant, tasked with translating, spoke with a hint of sadness in his eyes. When the ingredients start to steam, we add elk dung and then pour in horse urine. Madame Maxime felt nauseous upon hearing this and had to fight the urge to vomit, turning her head away. Hagrid, avoiding false flattery, simply scratched his head, looking somewhat embarrassed. The old giant sighed. "Please forgive our way of life if it makes you uncomfortable. Due to scarce resources, we giants have come to rely on these substances as spices. It might be hard for you to accept, but for us, it's an essential part of our existence." He paused before continuing. "You may stick to the barbecue later, seasoned only with salt. And remember, eat with vigor, as the giants won't be mindful enough to notice your dining preferences." The elderly giant seemed eager to help them adjust to this unfamiliar setting. He then introduced himself. "Forgive my earlier lack of communication. I am Moholt." "Thank you, Moholt," Hagrid responded, patting his arm in gratitude. As they ate, Hagrid's gaze wandered among the giants, searching for someone. Moholt, noticing this, asked, "What are you looking for?" Hagrid, with a tremble in his voice, replied, "Fredwaffe, my mother. Do you know where she is?" Moholt lowered his head, lost in thought, before slowly responding, "Ah, Fredwaffe, that poor woman. But—" He hesitated, as if the news was too painful to share. "She has been dead for many years." Madame Maxime's heart sank at this revelation. She saw a flash of sadness cross Hagrid's face and gently patted his shoulder, offering silent comfort and encouragement. Hagrid took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. "It's okay, Olim," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "Actually, I don't really remember her. She wasn't a good mother." Moholt, moved by the scene, bowed slightly. "I'm sorry to hear this news. Please excuse me for a moment," he said before turning to leave. However, Ethan, using his psychic powers, sensed something odd in Moholt's words. He frowned, turned to Oriana, and whispered a few instructions. Oriana nodded, discreetly deploying a clockwork scout that followed Moholt into the valley, disappearing with the old giant's silhouette. Update 4/3, additional update 93-108. Please support me with your custom orders, flowers, monthly votes, comments, and rewards. Your votes are incredibly important to me as the author. Chapter 467. As dawn broke the next day, Hagrid and Madame Maxime set off early to revisit the giant's camp. From afar, they could see the towering figure of Carcass standing at the center of the camp, his anticipation for their arrival palpable. Hagrid, carrying a dazzling helmet crafted by goblins, walked alongside Madame Maxime towards Carcass. This helmet, elegant and smooth, yet almost unbelievably strong, gleamed in the sunlight, its metallic luster making it not just a piece of armor, but a priceless work of art. Upon seeing the helmet, a flash of surprise crossed Carcass's eyes. He eagerly grabbed the helmet with both hands, his ugly mouth opening in an excited shout, followed by a roar of laughter. Moholt, standing by, translated for them. "Carcass is willing to accept your friendship and invites you to sit down and talk." Carcass, seemingly unable to put the helmet down, kept playing with it, his interest evident. Behind him, the eternal flame of the Kublai fairy fire was tied high on the stone wall, serving as a beacon for the camp. Throughout the conversation, Carcass, though not very talkative, showed a serious demeanor whenever Hagrid relayed Dumbledore's messages. His occasional questions revealed a keen interest in Dumbledore, a wizard the giants had long heard of and knew to be an ally, opposing the killing of the last giants in Britain. As Hagrid and Madame Maxime mentioned Dumbledore, the giants looked on with friendly curiosity. Some of the older giants, drawn by the conversation, sat around the campfire, listening to the stories shared by Hagrid and Madame Maxime. Their attire suggested some familiarity with human society, and they knew some English. They listened attentively, occasionally exchanging words in their own language, clearly showing a strong interest in the discussion. When it was time to leave, Carcass personally escorted Hagrid and Madame Maxime to the camp's gate, expressing hope for another gift the following day. Not far from the small cave where Hagrid and Madame Maxime resided, Ethan found a hidden cave for his own use. He sat quietly inside, attentively listening to the distant sounds of the wind. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a soft noise, and a gray owl fluttered in, a letter tied to its foot. Ethan quickly untied the letter and read it. It was from Lucius Malfoy, whose distinctive serpentine handwriting was unmistakable on the parchment. The letter revealed that the Death Eaters were aware of Hagrid's gift to Carcas and his interest in Dumbledore's words, which greatly concerned them. They planned to provoke a civil war among the giants and create chaos early the next morning. Malfoy's warning at the letter's end emphasized the brutal and chaotic nature of the giants' war, urging Ethan to be cautious. After reading the letter, Ethan's expression turned solemn. He stood up, exited the cave, and returned to the spruce tree he had chosen earlier. The towering spruce trees, with their dense foliage, provided excellent cover. Ethan lay quietly on the branches, patiently observing the valley below. From this vantage point, he could see the entire Giants' camp and watched as their mountain-like shadows moved across the valley. A slight noise soon caught Ethan's attention. He turned to see Oriana, the clockwork maid, appearing quietly behind him. She bowed and reported in a low voice, "Master, as per your instructions, I had the clockwork scout follow Moholt. He met with a total of 12 giants, but only one young giant matched your description. He called the young giant Grop, just as you said. Grop, being Hagrid's half-brother, was a pure-blood giant, the offspring of his mother and another giant." A glimmer of light flashed in Ethan's eyes, indicating that Moholt's actions were of significant interest. Ethan, having learned of his connection to Hagrid's younger brother, decided to personally meet Moholt and Grop. He and Oriana vanished swiftly, leaving behind only the sound of the wind whispering through the spruce trees in the valley. Moholt, visibly aged, bore the marks of time on his dark, wrinkled face. Despite his height, he appeared somewhat leaner than his robust and burly kin. His skin stretched over his huge ribs, reminiscent of ancient mountains. At that moment, the elder giant was occupied with feeding a dead deer to the younger giant beside him. Grop, in comparison, was less appealing to the eye, with a head-to-body ratio that was strikingly disproportionate. His head, covered in thick, fern-colored curls, sat almost directly on his shoulders, giving the impression of a massive ball with no neck. One could see a fat, fleshy ear poking out, flapping incessantly. Grop's back spanned wide like a small mountain range, and his attire, a gray-brown blouse made from what seemed like crudely stitched animal leather, was soiled and tattered, barely concealing his sturdy frame. "Moholt," Ethan called out, stepping from the bushes. The old giant's deep-set eyes sparkled with curiosity at the sound. He scrutinized Ethan's slender figure, then expressed his surprise. "Little man, who are you? How do you know Moholt's name?" Before Ethan could respond, Grop let out a roar and charged, wielding a massive wooden stick that seemed crafted from an entire dead linden tree. The stick's size dwarfed Ethan and Oriana combined, posing a significant threat. "Grop, you bad boy!" Moholt attempted to intervene as Grop rushed towards Ethan, but age had slowed his reactions. Ethan, however, reacted swiftly, pointing his wand at Grop. A purple-black spark of magic shot from the wand's tip, striking Grop's chest. The spell caused no physical harm, but Grop dropped his stick, clutched his head, and fled, wailing as if terrified. "Human, what have you done to this child?" Moholt's demeanor shifted at the sight, his concern evident. "Why can't anyone talk properly?" Ethan sighed, ignoring Moholt's question. He waved his wand again, this time targeting Moholt's feet. Dark tentacles emerged from the ground, slender for a giant but strong enough to ensnare. They wrapped around Moholt's ankles, tripping him into the mud. More tentacles sprouted, binding his limbs and waist, immobilizing him on the ground. Moholt could only glare at Ethan, a mix of anger and helplessness in his eyes. Grop, still in distress, continued his wailing run, but his escape was short-lived. The tentacles immediately entangled tightly around Grop, seeming to possess their own consciousness, as they flexibly wrapped around various parts of his body. This left him as restrained and immobile as Moholt. For creatures like giants, who have high magic resistance, ordinary magic attacks are obviously ineffective. You have to use spells that can affect their minds or summon physical entities to control them effectively, Ethan observed, nodding with satisfaction as he looked at the old man and the young man in front of him, who had lost their ability to resist. He approached Moholt calmly. The old giant's mood had gradually stabilized, but fear still lingered in his eyes. "Who are you?" Moholt asked, his voice trembling and hoarse as if something was blocking his throat. He had never encountered a wizard capable of subduing two giants so effortlessly. "I am Ethan Grimm, a friend of Rubus Hagrid," Ethan replied calmly. He noticed a flash of surprise cross Moholt's rugged face before continuing. "I've come to ask you a few questions and propose a deal." "Hagrid's friend? A powerful wizard?" Moholt murmured softly, then suddenly looked up at Ethan with pleading eyes. "Can you release me first? The tentacles are so tight, my bones feel like they're about to break." Ethan regarded him coldly, pondering for a moment before responding slowly. "I can let you go, but I expect you to behave more sensibly." He paused, his tone carrying a hint of threat. "If you try any tricks, next time, I won't just use tentacles. I'll use fire and lightning." To emphasize his point, Ethan waved his wand gently, and a fireball the size of a basketball shot out, striking the mountain wall with a loud crash and causing gravel to scatter. Witnessing this, Moholt trembled, his eyes widening with an even deeper fear. He quickly nodded to show he understood Ethan's warning, not daring to show any negligence. Chapter 468. When Ethan untied the tentacles that bound Moholt, the old giant stood up, trembling. He instinctively took 2 steps back, maintaining a certain distance from Ethan, fearing that the powerful wizard might suddenly attack him. Grop was even more timid, hiding behind Moholt and not daring to look at Ethan directly, only occasionally peeking from behind Moholt. "I'm so sorry, great wizard." Moholt's voice was filled with deep apology and awe. "I didn't mean to attack you. It's just, we giants once suffered a massacre by wizard's magic, and that memory has filled us with fear and hatred towards magic. So, when I saw you using magic on Grop, I instinctively wanted to protect him and acted impulsively." Ethan nodded slightly to express his understanding. "I understand your position and feelings, but you must realize that not every wizard is the murderer who hurt you. If you launch an attack rashly, you will only end up hurting yourself." He paused and his eyes sharpened. "I also hope you can take care of yourself and Grope. If you dare to act rashly again, I won't hesitate to show you the true power of magic." Yes, I understand," Moholt nodded repeatedly, not daring to disobey in the slightest. "We will definitely be obedient and won't cause you any more trouble." The two made a tacit agreement not to mention Grolop. They both knew that with Grolop's lack of understanding, he could suddenly act out for any reason, perhaps because he saw a human for the first time or thought it was just a game. "Let's get down to business," Ethan said as he floated down onto a boulder and looked down at Moholt. "I came here to ask you something about Grop and to make a deal with you." He pointed to the shivering Grop beside him. "This guy, if I guessed correctly, should be Hagrid's brother, right? Why did you come here to feed him?" Moholt lowered his head, his voice trembling. "Hagrid's mother, Frederwaffe, and I have been friends for many years. Before she died, she asked me to take care of Grop, but," he sighed, "the world of giants is too cruel. Grolop, he is too short and his mind is not very bright. If I bring him back to the tribe, he will only be bullied and ridiculed by other giants." Ethan couldn't help but nod, thinking of the young giants doing odd jobs at the giants' banquet. "I can tell that you are a rare, kind-hearted person." There was a hint of admiration in Ethan's voice, and his gaze softened as he looked at Moholt. Through psychic powers, he could sense that Moholt was telling the truth. Such a giant was indeed suitable to be a partner. He paused and then asked, "Then why did you never tell Hagrid these things? As Grop's brother, he should have the right to know that Grop is here." "Frederwaffe wouldn't like that." Moholt sighed and shook his head. "Frederwaffe hates short children. She hates Grop, but she hates Hagrid even more. She wouldn't like it." It seemed Moholt had some special feelings for Hagrid's mother, Frederwaffe, but Ethan didn't want to delve into the giant's personal matters. He observed the old giant in front of him, noting his decrepit body, and said, "I can see that your life is nearing its end. Your body is overwhelmed, and old injuries and illnesses are consuming you. However, I have a suggestion that may change your fate." Moholt raised his head, hope flashing in his eyes. Can you help me?" "Certainly," Ethan nodded. "As a wizard, I have the ability to make various potions. I can heal your old injuries and illnesses so your life can continue. But you must sign a magical contract with me and pledge your loyalty. What do you think of this arrangement?" Do you really have such means? Moholt's eyes widened, as if seeing a lifeline. But how do I know you're not lying to me? After all, we are not familiar with each other. Ethan sneered and interrupted him. You doubt my ability? Then I can simply knock you out. Right now, I could forcibly sign a contract with you, or I could just walk away. After all, there are many young giants. I can find another, our replacement at any time. The reason I chose you is to give you a chance for Hagrid's sake. After saying that, Ethan turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as he was about to take a step, Moholt's urgent voice stopped him. Wait, I accept your terms. Ethan stopped and turned around slowly. He saw Moholt crawling forward on the ground, disregarding his painfully bound body, trying to get closer to Ethan. Ethan couldn't help but feel a little moved. He took out a piece of parchment from his arms, waved his hand gently, and the parchment flew in front of Moholt. Moholt struggled forward, finally touching the light piece of parchment. He carefully picked it up, raised his head, and looked at Ethan with a mix of awe and confusion. What should I do to complete the contract? Ethan looked at the giant's big hand, compared it with the small parchment, and said helplessly, Given your size, signing is obviously impossible. Instead, use your blood to make a fingerprint. Moholt didn't hesitate at all and immediately bit his index finger. Blood gushed out instantly, and he endured the pain, pressing his bloody finger onto the parchment. Immediately afterward, the words on the parchment seemed to be activated and began to flicker. The light wasn't dazzling, but it carried a mysterious and solemn aura. After the light gradually dissipated, Moholt felt an invisible force quietly descending into his body. When he looked at Ethan again, he was surprised to find that the hostility in his heart had vanished, replaced by an inexplicable awe. Ethan waved his wand lightly, and a bottle of crystal-clear potion appeared in front of Moholt's eyes. Drink this potion, and all your wounds and diseases will be cured, Ethan explained to Moholt. This will allow you to live at least 10 more years. In fact, it was a diluted liquid of the rejuvenation elixir created by Ethan using the Philosopher's Stone. As long as the amount of this medicine was sufficient, living for hundreds or even thousands of years was not a problem, let alone 10 years longer. Moholt took the potion with tears of gratitude and drank it in one gulp. For humans, this bottle of potion was substantial, but for him, it barely soothed his throat. However, upon taking the potion, he immediately felt a warm current surge through his body, and the pain and diseases that had troubled him for years seemed to be alleviated at that moment. Ethan nodded with satisfaction, and then began to assign his first task. Your status in the tribe seems to be high. Next, I will provide you with some prey nearby. You will hold a grand giant banquet tonight and invite a group of giants to attend. He paused and added, Of course, you can invite some older giants who have a good relationship with you. Their wisdom and experience will be a valuable asset. However, most of the invitees should be able-bodied young people who are the future and hope of the tribe. The ratio of men to women should also be as equal as possible to maintain balance. Moholt listened carefully to Ethan's instructions and finally couldn't help but ask, Sir, what is your purpose in holding this banquet? Ethan thought for a moment and revealed, I am here on behalf of the Department of Management and Control of Magical Creatures of the Ministry of Magic in the Kingdom of Yin. As far as we know, you are the last tribe of giants in the world. We plan to build a new giant sanctuary in the Kingdom of Yin to provide you with a safe and harmonious home. You and your companions will become the first residents of this reserve. Moholt's eyes widened. This news was both unexpected and pleasant to him. Although it was a bit sad to be treated as protected animals by wizards, it also meant that they would have a safe home, free from worries about their future. His eyes sparkled with gratitude as he spoke. I understand, sir. I will do my utmost to assist you in this matter. Chapter 469. In the depths of a cavern, Rubeus Hagrid and Mrs. Alum Maxim were engaged in a lively conversation, their faces alight with anticipation for the gift exchange planned for the following day. Their laughter and chatter filled the cave, reminiscent of the ruckus caused by 100 peeves at play. However, their merriment was abruptly halted by a cacophony of noise from outside, prompting them to exchange surprised glances before they hurriedly made their way out of the cave. Upon exiting, they were greeted by a sight that quickened their pulses. The valley before them was in turmoil, with boiling water and the sounds of giants engaged in fierce combat echoing through the air. The giants, relying on their formidable strength, clashed violently, each collision resonating like thunder, threatening to fracture the valley itself. The brutality of the melee was a stark display of the giant's savage nature. At the heart of the battlefield stood Gugokakus, his grotesque appearance belied by his extraordinary might. Unlike his usual lethargic demeanor, he was a force of nature, his powerful fists unleashing gales with every punch. No single giant could withstand his onslaught, and few could endure more than a few blows before succumbing. The other giants gave him a wide berth, recognizing his dominance. However, in a sudden twist, a burly giant adorned with a necklace of human bones stealthily approached Gugokakus. Brandishing a sharp axe that gleamed ominously, he seized the moment of distraction to deliver a fatal blow from behind. Gugokakus's head was severed in an instant, his blood erupting like a geyser and painting the ground crimson. His decapitated body stumbled before collapsing, his head rolling to a halt after a brief journey across the battlefield. The victorious giant, with a cold gleam in his eye, claimed Gugokakus's head and removed the goblin-forged helmet, revealing the lifeless visage beneath. He then cast the head into a nearby mountain lake, where it sank into the abyss, leaving behind only ripples on the surface. As dawn broke, golden rays of sunlight bathed the valley, yet they could not erase the pervasive scent of blood. The snow, stained a vivid red, bore silent witness to the night's savage conflict. The power struggle among the giants had reached its conclusion, heralding the rise of a new Gugo. Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim, standing at the valley's edge, were somber as they surveyed the aftermath. "Olim, it's only been 2 days since we befriended Carcass, and now the giant's Gugo has already changed. Such rapid shifts are unsettling," Hagrid remarked with a sigh. Mrs. Maxim, her expression grave, nodded in agreement. Her gaze settled on Singu Gugo, the new leader, who sat imposingly on a thick beam, the helmet of Carcass perched atop his head, his fearsome appearance accentuated by his large black teeth and unkempt hair. His blood-stained axe lay by his side, its blade still gleaming menacingly. "It's no wonder the giants are so few in number," Mrs. Maxim observed bitterly. "Shingu Gugo may not be as approachable as Carcass was." Exchanging a look, both Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim recognized the deep concern in each other's eyes. Yet, they were undeterred. Hagrid, with a newfound respect for Mrs. Maxim's bravery, turned back to the valley. "Shall we approach him?" he asked. "Of course," Mrs. Maxim replied, her voice steady with resolve. "How could we give up after coming this far? Let's give it a try." Nodding in agreement, Hagrid admired her courage. Clutching the gift they had intended for Carcass, they made their way towards Shingu Gugo. The new ruler, leaning casually against the crossbar with one hand on his axe, regarded them with a cold, disdainful gaze, his eyes brimming with hostility. Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim, undaunted, continued forward, hoping to bridge the gap between them and the giant's new leader. Ethan could already sense that their attempt was likely doomed to fail, yet Hagrid refused to surrender, preparing to make one final effort. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, he raised the score, a gift he had intended for Kakus, a large roll of fire dragon skin, and announced a gift for the giant Gugo. But before he could finish, dizziness overcame him. He found himself firmly seized by 2 of Shingogo's giant men. Their hands, like iron vices, bound him tightly, lifting him off the ground. Hagrid struggled in vain, only to see the ground recede further away from him. Suddenly, a silver light flashed, followed by Mrs. Maxim's sharp command, "Let him go!" She had drawn her wand and cast spells swiftly. 2 eye spells shot out like lightning, striking the eyes of the giants with precision. Such a response was expected from the headmistress of Beauxbatons. The giants wailed and released Hagrid, who felt a thud as he hit the ground. Ignoring the pain, he quickly got to his feet and ran towards Madame Maxime. However, the surrounding giants, now enraged by the incident, began to move about clumsily, their steps causing the valley to tremble. Their eyes, filled with hatred, seemed eager to tear the wizard before them to pieces. As Moholt had mentioned, the giants harbored deep resentment towards wizards and magic due to past grievances, and Madame Maxime's use of magic only intensified their animosity. Seeing the giants advance, Madame Maxime's heart raced. She urgently grabbed Hagrid's arm, saying, "Come on, we have to get out of here." At that moment, Shinguji, brandishing his sharp axe, charged at them with a roar. The axe gleamed menacingly in the sunlight, ready to cleave anything in its path. Madame Maxime, not daring to hesitate, tightly grasped Hagrid's wrist, and they both fled into the woods. There, they used an illusion spell to evade the giant's pursuit. After about half an hour of frantic running, they finally returned to the cave atop the mountain, gasping for air. The cave's dark and cold interior mirrored their current state of mind. They realized that re-entering the giant's camp was now impossible, at least for the foreseeable future. They needed to devise a new strategy to deal with the hostile giants. Sitting down dejectedly, Hagrid murmured, "Merlin's beard, what do we do now? Dumbledore is relying on us," and Marcus was about to agree to the conditions. But now, he punched the stone wall in frustration. Madame Maxime appeared equally disheartened. She sighed, looking around the cave, and said, "This happened too suddenly. We can't venture out during the day. We need to observe the situation and plan our next steps." They spent the next while lying at the cave's entrance, carefully monitoring the valley below. During their vigil, they uncovered a crucial piece of information. Shinguge did not despise all wizards, only them. When Malfoy and McNeil arrived with gifts for Shinguogo, they were not met with hostility but seemed to enjoy a cordial conversation. This revelation infuriated Hagrid. "I recognize that McNeil. He was the executioner for the Board for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. He was dismissed after the turmoil at the Ministry of Magic. He's a madman who delights in harming innocent beings and decapitating creatures with his axe. He's always been a menace." "Executioner," Madame Maxime blinked. "Just like Gao Gauma." Hagrid nodded solemnly. "They are all complete lunatics. I bet it's because of this that they engaged in such speculative conversations." Hearing Hagrid's words, Madame Maxime felt a chill. She expressed her concern. "If he convinces the giants and the mysterious man to join forces, it will indeed be very troublesome." Upon hearing this, Hagrid couldn't remain seated. He stood up, his voice loud and clear. "We can't let them succeed. We must take action." "Don't worry, Hagrid," Madame Maxime quickly intervened, her tone reassuring. "Although Gao Gauma seems to be leaning towards the mysterious man, it doesn't mean all giants feel the same. We need to find a way to persuade those giants who are reluctant to follow Gugo's path." As she spoke, she shifted her legs, which had grown numb from sitting too long, and stood up with some effort. "We need to devise a new plan." "Okay, let's do it." Hagrid's voice was firm and decisive. However, he soon fell into deep thought, his expression turning sad. "But how can we identify the giants who are unwilling to submit to Gao Gauma?" Chapter 470. Madame Maxime sighed softly upon hearing Hagrid's words, finally coming to a full understanding of him. Hagrid was passionate, brave, and endearing, albeit a bit naive. Yet in her eyes, he was a rare gem among those who accepted her for who she was. With patience, she explained, "The giants who have been defeated and bear scars are the ones most likely to oppose Gao Gauma. Those with any sense among them will hide, seeking refuge in the surrounding caves, just as we are now. Therefore, we can discreetly visit various caves tonight, and perhaps we'll encounter a few giants open to hearing our views." Upon hearing Madame Maxime's plan, Hagrid's eyes sparkled with admiration. "Olympe, you're incredibly intelligent. You're the wisest woman I've ever met. How remarkable." His earnest and lavish praise made Madame Maxime blush, a shy smile briefly crossing her face before she quickly composed herself. However, her concern quickly shifted back to a more pressing matter. "I'm more worried about the Death Eaters than the giants," she said, her tone turning grave. "This internal conflict among the giants can't be a coincidence. There must be Death Eaters behind it, sowing discord." Noticing Hagrid's puzzled look, she felt compelled to elaborate. "Consider this. Gao Gauma's axe, crafted entirely of metal, is both intricate and sharp. A weapon of such caliber couldn't possibly be the work of giants. Given its size, it was clearly made specifically for giants. So how did he come to possess it? After all valuable items within the giant tribe are under Kakus's control." "I understand now," Hagrid said, a light of realization dawning in his eyes. "But Dumbledore advised us to steer clear of the Death Eaters. Our mission is to follow his instructions and find those giants who refuse to bow to Gao Gauma." He scratched his unkempt hair, looking somewhat distressed. Unbeknownst to them, their intention to avoid the Death Eaters was futile. Malfoy had successfully rallied a group to his cause, attacking the giants and leaving the camp with those he had persuaded, as Ethan had requested. However, McNeil, disregarding Malfoy's caution, chose to stay behind. He was determined to launch an attack on Hagrid and Madame Maxime that evening, making a confrontation inevitable. As night descended, Hagrid and Madame Maxime moved stealthily, attempting to enter their designated cave while the giants slept. Contrary to their expectations, they were ambushed in the mountains by McNeil, who had been tracking them. A cold smirk on his face, McNeil taunted, "Gaugalma was right, you are indeed here. How pitiful that Dumbledore would send you on such a futile mission. Your efforts are in vain and will accomplish nothing." Madame Maxime, incensed by McNeil's brazen attitude, her eyes ablaze with fury, waved her wand vigorously. A dazzling light erupted from its tip, sweeping towards McNeil and his allies like a torrent of flames. Hagrid, recalling Dumbledore's instructions, instinctively tried to restrain the enraged Madame Maxime. However, she was beyond reasoning, driven by a desire to teach her adversaries a stern lesson. Left with no choice, Hagrid joined the fray alongside Madame Maxime. Despite being a half-giant who had left Hogwarts prematurely, Hagrid's proficiency in basic offensive spells was notable. He adeptly cast a series of spells, Stunning Curse, Petrification Curse, and Imprisonment Curse, unleashing a fierce assault on their foes. His half-giant heritage endowed him with superior physical strength and magical resilience, rendering him impervious to weaker spells. Thus, he could stand his ground and attack relentlessly, only occasionally needing to cast the Iron Armor Curse to shield against more potent spells. With this advantage, even when faced with the siege of 3 or 4 Death Eaters, Hagrid could barely maintain his invincible position. Meanwhile, Madame Maxime, as the head mistress of Beauxbatons, truly demonstrated her formidable strength at this moment. Her spellcasting was not only rapid, but also astonishingly powerful, mirroring her towering stature. She proved to be a magic master on par with Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick. Her half-giant heritage elevated her combat abilities to new heights. With her formidable strength, she managed to overpower McNeil and accurately cast the Eye Spell, rendering 2 attacking giants powerless. However, that was the extent of their advantage. The physical prowess of the giants was overwhelming, and their magic did little to harm them. Even the Eye Spell only temporarily blinded the giants. When one of the giants, blinded and disoriented, approached Madame Maxime with a wooden stick, she realized they could no longer afford to be reckless. They had to flee. Blazing flames! Madame Maxime summoned a massive ring of fire with a vigorous wave of her wand. The intense heat and power of the flames repelled the Death Eaters and caused the giants to retreat. Seizing the moment of confusion created by the blinding firelight, Madame Maxime and Hagrid made a dash for the mountains. Madame Maxime was filled with regret as they ran. She realized they should not have stayed to search for the remaining giants with Hagrid. Perhaps they should have chosen to flee the moment Gaugalma overthrew Cacus. But it was too late for regrets. The Death Eaters were already upon them, leaving them no choice but to run towards the cave in panic. The area near the ridge was dotted with numerous caves, the handiwork of giants. These behemoths had burrowed into the mountains, creating countless hidden refuges. It was no surprise that so many giants could conceal themselves in the Ural Mountains without being detected by Muggles for so long. This feat was achieved not only with the assistance of the Russian magic Duma, but also due to these strategically placed caves. Madame Maxime and Hagrid navigated the mountain walls, searching for a temporary hiding spot. Eventually, they discovered a small, concealed cave and hurried inside. Hagrid anxiously peeked outside to gauge the situation, only to see the Death Eaters systematically directing the giants in their search. His heart sank. "We're going to die," Hagrid thought despairingly. His mind was in turmoil, haunted by the approaching noise and the giants' triumphant, terrifying laughter. Humanity was reminded of the terror of being dominated by giants and the humiliation of captivity. "Hagrid, come on, let's try going down. Maybe we can find another exit," Madame Maxime suggested, her voice calm and firm, trying to instill a sliver of hope. Hagrid nodded. though they both knew the likelihood of finding another way out was slim. But what other choice did they have? A frontal breakout was out of the question, with dozens of giants and Death Eaters closely guarding the entrance. They would be torn apart if discovered. What about apparition? The thought crossed their minds, but neither of them was capable of performing such magic. Their half-giant heritage, while granting them considerable physical strength, also deprived them of many wizarding abilities, including certain spells. Directly acting on the body, such as transforming the human body in apparition, the power of blood can be a double-edged sword. At this moment, this disadvantage might lead to the death of two individuals here. Who could possibly come to their rescue? Madame Maxime clenched her teeth in frustration. Despite her youth and the myriad of things she still wanted to accomplish, the prospect of dying here was unacceptable. With determination, she exclaimed, "Let's go. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Without hesitation, she turned and sprinted along the mountain path, delving deeper into the ridge. Hagrid, after a brief moment of hesitation, decided to follow her. Their sudden movement caught the attention of the giants, who responded with a thunderous roar and began to chase after them. The sound of their heavy footsteps reverberated throughout the valley. Please consider supporting my work with custom orders, flowers, monthly votes, comments, and rewards. Your votes are especially appreciated. As the author, this support means a lot to me. Chapter 471, A Fierce Battle in the Ural Mountains. Late at night in the Ural Mountains, a thrilling chase unfolded. Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim, relying on their keen intuition and excellent escape skills, managed to evade their pursuers for most of the night. However, being outnumbered by the giants and Death Eaters, they found themselves trapped in a narrow mountain pass, completely surrounded. A fierce battle ensued, with the flashes of curses and the roars of giants disrupting the once tranquil forest. Despite their valiant efforts, Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim were gradually overwhelmed by the sheer number of their adversaries. McNeil, observing the scene with a sinister smile, dodged a disarming curse from Hagrid and countered with a wave of his wand, casting a malevolent spell. Hagrid, sensing the impending danger, was shocked to see the curse veer towards Mrs. Maxim, who was preoccupied with fending off two Death Eaters and several charging giants. In a desperate move, Hagrid stepped in front of Mrs. Maxim, intercepting the curse with his body. The red light enveloped him, causing intense pain as he struggled in vain, blood seeping from his wounds and his voice silenced by the curse's grip. Mrs. Maxim, witnessing Hagrid's sacrifice, unleashed a roar of anguish and with a swift motion cast a powerful spell towards McNeil. "Thunderbolt explosion!" she shouted, sending a beam of magical energy that narrowly missed McNeil but obliterated two Death Eaters upon striking a nearby rock. Refusing to relent, Mrs. Maxim cast another spell, a crushing curse, aimed directly at McNeil. He narrowly escaped by transforming into black smoke and apparating away, but the curse found another target, injuring a giant's calf. Despite the severity of the injury, the giant's robust physique prevented it from being fatal. Realizing the limitations of her magic against the giants and the relentless assault from the Death Eaters, Mrs. Maxim felt her strength waning. Her magical power was depleting rapidly, leaving her to confront the grim reality of their situation. Madame Maxime's body began to show signs of exhaustion. Hagrid, struck by McNeil's curse, was in indescribable pain. His skin cracked, bled, and his face distorted beyond recognition. Amidst the chaos, Madame Maxime frantically cast spells to counter the black magic afflicting Hagrid, while simultaneously fending off the relentless attacks of the Death Eaters. McNeil skillfully used apparition to evade a crushing curse, which instead struck a giant. The curse nearly shattered the giant's calf. Despite his screams of agony, the giant's robust physique rendered him relatively unharmed by the powerful dark magic. Madame Maxime found herself overwhelmed, unable to counter the combined forces of the giants and the encircling Death Eaters. As the situation grew dire, Madame Maxime's heart sank into despair, yet her resolve did not waver. She dodged and countered the barrage of spells with agility, but the giants, armed with massive stones and axes, charged at her. Adding to her peril, several Death Eaters launched a covert attack from behind, their wands aimed menacingly at her, their faces twisted in anticipation of victory. Despite her valiant efforts, Madame Maxime couldn't evade all the attacks. A Death Eater's spell, a vicious purple arc of magic, struck her forcefully, launching her into the air before she crashed to the ground, overwhelmed by despair. In that moment of desperation, a wizard dressed in aurora attire, his face obscured by a beak mask, appeared like a guardian angel. With a wave of his wand, he summoned a terrifying spectacle. A bright red cloud, not of natural formation, but conjured from intense fire magic, enveloped the area. This was the burning cloud technique, a powerful spell that created a maelstrom of white-hot ashes, dealing fire damage to everything within its grasp. This marked the first public use of an 8th-level spell by Ethan, following his advancement to level 15 as a wizard. The Death Eaters and Giants caught within the cloud were instantly subjected to excruciating heat, their screams piercing the night as they were reduced to ashes. Miraculously, Ethan and 2 hybrid giants remained unscathed, shielded by an unseen force that navigated the deadly cloud around them. This display of Ethan's mastery over his magic left Madame Maxime in awe. She had never witnessed such potent magic, nor such precise control. She wondered about the origins of this formidable mage, whose power seemed beyond comprehension. As the red cloud gradually dissipated, tranquility returned to the surroundings. The 7 or 8 giants that had initially encircled Hagrid and Mrs. Maxim lay on the ground, transformed into heaps of pitch-black charcoal. The fate of the 5 Death Eaters, who had been too close, was even more harrowing. Their bodies were entirely consumed by the flames, leaving behind nothing but 2 small piles of black, ash-like residue. A cool breeze swept through, causing the black ash to flutter gently in the air, reminiscent of feathers. In the wake of the red cloud's fury, the giants positioned near the rear and several Death Eaters, who were further away, narrowly avoided the lethal blaze of the cloud-burning technique. These giants, being on the fringes of the magical onslaught and bolstered by their robust physiques, managed to escape the terrifying expanse of the attack just in time. Despite their escape, they sustained severe injuries. Their bodies were scorched, and their exposed skin was marred with burns and blisters. They lay on the ground, twitching and groaning in agony. The air was thick with the repugnant scent of burnt flesh. Amidst the giant suffering, a group of 7 or 8 aurors, all dressed uniformly, arrived on the scene. They swiftly encircled the remaining Death Eaters and giants, positioning themselves strategically from all directions. Their wands glowed with a spiritual light, signaling their readiness for combat. At a distance, another group of giants began to assemble, each wielding a massive iron weapon. It was clear they were following the Auror's commands, ready to support them in the ensuing battle. Chapter 4472. Seeing the miserable condition of their companions and the approaching Aurors, the remaining Death Eaters' shock quickly turned into panic as the burly giants charged towards them. They looked restlessly towards MacNeil, seeking his guidance and protection. They had not anticipated that the formidable Aurors would pursue them from the kingdom of Yin to Russia. Unfortunately, MacNeil was no longer able to assist them. Without uttering a word, his body instantly transformed into black smoke, and he vanished. Witnessing this, the remaining Death Eaters scrambled to follow MacNeil's lead, turning into black smoke to apparat away from the scene. Ethan, who had disguised himself as an Auror, merely fired a fireball in haste and did not block their escape. He refrained from using a dimensional anchor, clearly allowing these escapees to slip through deliberately. Ethan's initial inaction was strategic. He aimed to dismantle MacNeil's forces without causing MacNeil's death, to avoid implicating Lucius Malfoy. This maneuver would, by comparison, enhance Lucius Malfoy's standing in Voldemort's eyes. Moreover, Ethan had waited for the most critical moment to act, managing to rescue Hagrid and Madame Maxime. While this approach bore risks, as long as they survived the battle, Ethan was confident he could secure their support in future discussions. A few giants, abandoned by their Death Eater allies, stood bewildered. However, upon noticing Ethan and the surrounding giants, their confusion quickly turned to ferocity. They charged at Ethan, intent on unleashing their fury on him. Despite their size, their attack was halted abruptly, as if they were frozen in time. Their weapons clattered to the ground, raising clouds of dust. The giants' eyes turned hollow, their spirits seemingly crushed, leaving them immobilized as Ethan approached to enforce a magical contract of servitude upon them. There were exceptions, however. A couple of giants, stronger and more willful, momentarily broke free from the group human immobilization technique. They charged at Ethan with immense fists, aiming to crush him. Yet their resistance was swiftly quelled by Ethan's potent psychic powers. Under the domination technique, their eyes glazed over with confusion and submission, and they were eventually coerced into signing a servitude contract. Witnessing this, a giant in the distance attempted to flee in terror. But before they could escape, they were intercepted by giants under Ethan's control. These giants wielded iron weapons and mercilessly struck down the fleeing giants. Those attempting to escape, armed with nothing but wooden sticks, stood no chance against the onslaught. The sight extinguished any remaining hope among the giants. Resigned to their fate, they ceased resistance and submitted to Ethan's manipulation. Meanwhile, Madame Maxime had regained some strength and began to lift the curse afflicting Hagrid. After considerable effort, she successfully freed Hagrid from the curse. Leaning weakly against Madame Maxime, Hagrid watched with gratitude as she tended to his wounds. However, witnessing Ethan's treatment of the giants sparked a flicker of anger and intolerance in Hagrid's eyes. He opened his mouth, intending to halt Ethan's actions, but Madame Maxime swiftly covered his mouth before he could speak. "Shh, Hagrid, don't act rashly," she whispered. Hagrid attempted to free himself from Madame Maxime's hold, but his weakened state rendered him immobile. He could only watch in despair as Ethan methodically subdued each giant. Madame Maxime, offering a comforting grip on Hagrid's hand, returned his wand and softly reminded him, "Calm down, Hagrid. We're not strong enough to confront him now." Ethan successfully subdued the last giant, and after ensuring no one was left unchecked, approached Hagrid and Madame Maxime. Under their confused and wary gazes, Ethan slowly removed his mask and dispelled the illusion of the Auror figure created by the powerful phantom spell. This revelation struck Hagrid and Madame Maxime like lightning, and they gasped in shock. They had believed the Auror had come from the Yin Kingdom to assist them, not realizing it was all the work of a single person, and the rest were mere illusions. Even more astonishing was the fact that this lone Auror was not an Auror at all, but Ethan Green. Ignoring their astonishment, Ethan retrieved an uplifting potion from his uniform pocket, approached Hagrid, and offered it to the half-giant, whispering, "Drink this, it will make you feel better." Hagrid, with a look of gratitude, accepted the potion and drank it in one gulp. As the potion took effect, his cracked, bleeding skin began to heal, and his pain subsided. Madame Maxime, recovering from her initial shock, managed to steady her emotions before asking, "Mr. Green, why are you here?" Dumbledore wasn't the only one aware of the Dark Lord's interest in the giants. Jaina had received relevant information and informed me, prompting my visit to assess the situation, Ethan explained calmly, seemingly unaffected by the skepticism in Madame Maxime's voice. However, Madame Maxime, with a frown and a tone laced with doubt and disapproval, pressed on. "I've noticed you binding the giants with a servitude contract. While I'm unsure how you've managed to transform a magical contract into this, such actions, enslaving others and controlling their fate, are as vile as the unforgivable curses and illegal when applied to people." As the headmistress of Beauxbaton, Madame Maxime was knowledgeable and immediately recognized Ethan's methods, leading her to confront him openly. Despite her fear of Ethan's formidable power, she scrutinized his expression for any sign of guilt while preparing for any potential threat his exposure might pose. Ethan, however, remained composed, showing no sign of remorse. He confidently produced an official document from his pocket, stating, "This document, issued by the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, pertains to the establishment of a new giant research reserve. My involvement was sanctioned by the Ministry of Magic to facilitate the population of this newly established sanctuary." Madame Maxime, after quickly reviewing the document, displayed a look of disbelief. She had not anticipated Ethan possessing such authorization. Ethan, with a faint smile, added, "Moreover, a servitude contract is merely a form of magical agreement. It shouldn't be condemned as an unforgivable curse based on personal biases. The law does not prohibit entering into such contracts." With a magical creature. He paused, then added, "Moreover, I don't mean any disrespect. Even if the law equates the slavery contract with the unforgivable curse, as you mentioned, they are only illegal when used on humans. In the current wizarding laws, no country equates the rights of giants with those of humans." But, Madame Maxime opened her lips slightly, as if she wanted to refute Ethan's words, but Ethan preempted the question she was about to ask. In fact, the Ministry of Magic's decision was based on far-reaching considerations for the giant community. We all know how violent and, frankly, not very intelligent giants can be. Allowing them to roam freely in the wild, especially considering their current trend of engaging in deadly conflicts with each other, could lead to the extinction of this last giant tribe within a few years. Madame Maxime wanted to object, but recalling the brutal civil war among the giants that had erupted just the day before, a power struggle that had resulted in the loss of 7 or 8 giants, roughly 1/20th of their total population, she had to admit there was some truth in Ethan's words. Ethan continued, "Therefore, we had to take measures to ensure the survival of the dwindling number of giants by relocating them to England, where they could have a better life in newly established reserves. The slavery contract, in reality, is a measure to restrict their behavior, designed to prevent them from engaging in further violence and to ensure they comply with the arrangements within the reserve. Of course, to avoid negative public opinion, we have to frame this protection as research." At this point, Ethan's expression turned serious. In fact, when it comes to breaking the law, the real lawbreakers are the dark wizards, Professor Dumbledore, and you two. Even as the head of a magical school, you do not have the authority to make contact with and attempt to win over giants without the Ministry of Magic's permission. Chapter 473. Madame Maxime was rendered completely silent. She had come to realize the caliber of the individual she was dealing with. Ethan was no ordinary student or wizard. His magical prowess was formidable, and he was backed by a significant force. According to Dumbledore's revelations, at least half of the Ministry of Magic supported him. Faced with such a formidable opponent, how could she possibly find legal or compliant grounds to challenge him? Despite her reservations about Ethan's actions, the current circumstances forced Madame Maxime to cooperate with him. Together, they managed to stabilize Hagrid's injuries. Unlike the skeptical Madame Maxime, Hagrid, being a close friend, showed more warmth towards Ethan. Although he disapproved of Ethan's use of slavery contracts to control the giants, the honest half-giant struggled to voice his discontent. Ethan, understanding Hagrid well, didn't need psychic abilities to grasp his friend's concerns and address them with patience and kindness, a stark contrast to his interaction with Madame Maxime. "Hagrid, I know you're uneasy about the slavery contract, but believe me, the Ministry of Magic doesn't intend to enslave the giants. The contract is a necessary measure to ensure their safe relocation to the reserve in the UK. Given their volatile and aggressive nature, without these constraints, it would be challenging to resettle them. Our goal is to protect them and improve their quality of life." Ethan's persuasive skills, enhanced by his innate charm and the deliberate projection of a charming human's aura, made his argument compelling. Hagrid's demeanor softened, and he found himself nodding in agreement. Yes, you're right." Ethan elaborated. "Through the servitude contract, we can achieve much more. Imagine the giants learning our language and receiving a civilized education under our guidance. This would not only curb their violent tendencies, but also help them integrate into our society and lead better lives. Otherwise, an attack by them on ordinary wizards in Britain could result in a catastrophe." Hagrid, scratching his unkempt hair, pondered Ethan's words. He recalled Moholt's opinion and realized the benefits of controlling and educating the giants. It would spare them from using repulsive ingredients like deer dung and horse urine in their cooking, a significant improvement. Most importantly, Ethan Green, a trusted friend, was in charge. Madame Maxime, still harboring doubts and confusion, wisely chose to remain silent, recognizing the futility of challenging Ethan in this context. However, she resolved to report her observations to Dumbledore upon her return. Ethan, seeing Hagrid convinced, felt a sense of relief. He didn't want this issue to strain their friendship. He then reflected on Hagrid's unique talent in caring for magical creatures. Hagrid's unconventional approach to breeding magical creatures, based on his extensive personal experience, had yielded remarkable results, such as the creation of new species like the fried-ended snail. Despite its unappealing appearance, it was a resilient species, easy to care for, and prolific. This innovation, among others, underscored Hagrid's unique contribution to the field, diverging from mainstream wizarding practices. The more Ethan pondered, the more he recognized Hagrid's unique talent. Aware that Onyxia urgently needed a dependable assistant, Ethan entertained the idea of enticing Hagrid away from Dumbledore. He proactively extended an invitation to Hagrid. "Hagrid, if you have any reservations, I can offer you a position as an expert consultant for the Reserve. This role would allow you to actively engage in the Reserve's operations, not only caring for the giants, but also offering guidance and supervision to our staff." To make the proposition even more attractive, Ethan elaborated on the vision. This new reserve isn't just for giants. It's a comprehensive sanctuary and research facility. We plan to shelter and study a variety of magical creatures here, including manticores, cockatrices, fire dragons, and of course, some newly discovered dragon-blooded creatures. These dragon-blooded creatures were Onyxia's innovation. As Ethan's trust in Onyxia grew, he eased the restrictions on her, permitting the use of dragon blood to create dragon beasts as dependents. This new reserve, spearheaded by Onyxia in her new role overseeing the Department of Management and Control of Magical Creatures, served as a dragon nest for these beings. Officially, these dragon beasts were presented not as creations, but as a newly discovered mysterious species, a narrative that piqued the wizarding world's curiosity. The Quibbler magazine, captivated by the story, was the first to report on it, casting these creatures into the realm of urban legends akin to Lizardman and Frogman. While this publicity drew many curious readers, it also led many to dismiss dragon-blooded creatures as another myth concocted by the Quibbler. However, Ethan was unfazed, knowing that the eventual release of official Discovery documentation and his publication in the Annals of Magical Creatures would dispel all myths. This would not only vindicate the Quibbler, but also enhance its popularity, legitimizing the dragon beast's inclusion in the new reserve. Hagrid was visibly torn by Ethan's offer, caught between appreciation and loyalty. "Ethan, I'm truly grateful for your trust and invitation," Hagrid said, his voice tinged with unease. "But I also have responsibilities at Hogwarts as the keykeeper, gamekeeper, and professor of care of magical creatures. I can't disregard the trust and expectations Principal Dumbledore has in me, much less betray him." Ethan responded with a reassuring smile, understanding Hagrid's dilemma. "Hagrid, you're misunderstanding my intention. I'm not asking you to leave Hogwarts or betray Principal Dumbledore. In fact, I believe this role won't conflict with your duties at Hogwarts. It's a part-time position, and many tasks won't require your direct involvement. What I truly need is your expertise in breeding and nurturing those remarkable creatures." Seeing Hagrid's continued hesitation, Ethan decided to further entice him. "By the way, I also plan to acquire Norbert, or rather, Norberta now, and relocate her to the new reserve. I think you'd be delighted to reunite with her. Of course, you can always go back and consult Dumbledore's opinion on all of this before making a decision. I'm confident that the headmaster will be very supportive of this plan," Ethan suggested, his words sparking interest. Hagrid's large, furry head perked up at the mention of Norbert's name. For Hagrid, Norbert was not just a pet, but a piece of his heart. The prospect of reuniting with the magical creature he had raised from birth was immensely appealing. Ethan knew he had struck a chord with Hagrid, so he half-jokingly added, "Take the job, Hagrid. This isn't just an opportunity to reunite with Norbert. There are other benefits as well." With a mischievous grin, he gestured towards Mrs. Maxim, who stood beside him. "You see, the French wizarding world holds a stronger concept of social class than the British. Frankly, with your current status, marrying a headmistress of a magic school, especially one as beautiful as Mrs. Maxim, without facing criticism would be challenging." Ignoring Mrs. Maxim's blush, Ethan continued, "However, joining a protected area changes the game. If you excel in your role there, you'll also share in the research findings. Eventually, you could become an expert in the study of magical creatures. This way, you can prove that you're fully deserving of a headmistress's affection, even without the backing of others. Hagrid glanced at Mrs. Maxim, his heart stirred by Ethan's words. Though he was a man of simple honesty, he was far from foolish. He recognized the wisdom in Ethan's advice. This invitation represented not just a career opportunity, but also a chance to elevate his social standing, earn respect, and perhaps even love. Moreover, he was genuinely excited about the magical creature reserve Ethan mentioned. With this realization, any last doubts in Hagrid's mind evaporated. Chapter 474. After Hagrid finally nodded and agreed to work in the reserve, Ethan's mood significantly lightened. He gestured to the accompanying giants, and Moholt led a relatively shorter figure among them forward. Despite being 16 feet tall, this giant child, compared to his peers, seemed almost youthful. Ethan turned to Hagrid with a warm smile. "Hagrid, I have good news for you. Though your mother, Friedvarfa, has passed away, I've found your half-brother, Grop. Moholt has been looking after him over the years." Upon hearing this, Hagrid's eyes widened in shock. Despite his not fully recovered state, he stood up abruptly and staggered forward. Maxim's gaze drifted towards the sea, unable to watch as Hagrid moved towards Grop and the other giant. The sight of the half-giant was admittedly a bit jarring. However, Hagrid seemed oblivious to Grop's appearance, his eyes brimming with tears. "Don't worry, Hagrid," Ethan said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'll take Grop back to the giant sanctuary. You'll be able to see each other more often, and you won't have to worry about their safety anymore. In the sanctuary, the giants' living conditions will be vastly improved, and they won't have to suffer from lack of resources or sleep outdoors." Hagrid, overwhelmed with emotion, pulled out a polka-dot bandana from his moleskin coat pocket, dabbing at his eyes before hurrying towards his brother. Grop, seeing Hagrid approach, ran towards him as well. Hagrid was expecting a hug, but Grop, mistaking Hagrid for a stranger, let out a low roar and raised his arm as if to strike. "Grop, bad boy!" Ethan shouted. At Ethan's command, Grop's aggression ceased immediately. His raised hand fell to his side, and his expression softened. After a moment, he seemed to recognize Hagrid and showed no further intention of harm. Meanwhile, Hagrid, oblivious to the near miss, joyfully reunited with his brother, their hoarse voices mingling. Since Grop was not adept at speech, Moholt assisted with translation. Grop, seemingly indifferent to the reunion, entertained himself with a branch, pulling it towards him, then releasing it to watch it snap back, a satisfied smile on his face as snowflakes cascaded down on the trio. While Hagrid reconnected with his long-lost brother, Ethan seized the moment to approach Mrs. Maxim. As Hagrid's best friend, he spoke earnestly. "Madam, as you might be aware, Hagrid was expelled from Hogwarts due to an unjust accusation." Ethan recounted the past slowly. Fortunately, Principal Dumbledore saw his potential and kindness, using his influence to retain him at the school. Though he served only as the keeper of keys and grounds, Dumbledore often stepped in to resolve Hagrid's troubles, earning his deep respect and admiration. Ethan paused before continuing. However, Dumbledore had many responsibilities and could only do so much for Hagrid, who missed many educational opportunities. As a result, Hagrid's understanding might seem simplistic and naive, yet he is genuinely kind-hearted, always repaying any kindness shown to him twofold. I hope you can offer him your patience and understanding in the future." Mrs. Maxim felt a stir of emotion at Ethan's words, reflecting on the depth of Hagrid's character. When she listened to Ethan's words, it became clear that she was Hagrid's girlfriend and should have been the one who knew Hagrid best. However, through Ethan's narration, she felt like an outsider. The bond between Ethan and Hagrid appeared to be deeper than she had imagined, and the way Ethan spoke of Hagrid was not as a young wizard would about his professor, but rather like an elder discussing a junior. Yet, this seemed perfectly logical. Hagrid, despite his towering stature, had a simplicity akin to that of a child, whereas Ethan, though young, exuded a sense of maturity and stability. Reflecting on this, it made sense for Ethan to speak of Hagrid in such a manner. Observing Hagrid enjoying a moment of familial warmth with his brother, Mrs. Maxim's doubts began to fade. She nodded gently and assured Ethan, "Of course I will take good care of him." Ethan smiled slightly and continued, Principal Dumbledore has always looked after Hagrid, solving his problems at every turn. However, this has led Hagrid to develop a certain dependency, preventing him from truly maturing. Therefore, I plan to use his part-time job at the Reserve as an opportunity to teach him some of the knowledge he missed out on by dropping out of school, under the guise of on-the-job training. I will also have those working with him guide him in understanding some life lessons. This will not only prevent him from making mistakes, but also ease Principal Dumbledore's worries. Through his psychic abilities, Ethan could sense that Mrs. Maxim was still harboring jealousy and suspicion towards him. So he tactfully addressed her concerns about Hagrid. Indeed, he could feel her hostility towards the half-giant waning. Although Ethan's words subtly criticized Dumbledore, under Ethan's influence, Mrs. Maxim found herself agreeing with his sentiments. Bringing the giants back to the UK was no small feat. The new director of the Department for the Management and Control of Magical Creatures, Miss Catlana Presto, felt overwhelmed by the sight of the giants Ethan had brought back. The magical creature reserve mentioned in the document Ethan showed to Mrs. Maxim did indeed exist, and the document was authentic from the Ministry of Magic. However, Ethan had authored a significant portion of its content. Since Jaina and Onyxia were appointed directors of their respective departments, Ethan had been carrying around a batch of official parchments from both departments. These parchments were blank, except for their pre-signed signatures and magical marks. These were intended for Ethan to use as needed, allowing him to issue documents on the spot. Ethan could have echoed the words of Cao Shaoqin, a famous official, saying, "Want an imperial edict? Let's write one." Similarly, Ethan could say, "Need a document from the Ministry of Magic? Let's draft one." As for the aftermath of issuing such documents, when Jaina and Onyxia prepared these blank documents for Ethan, they knew they would have to support whatever actions he took. They had no choice but to follow through with his decisions, just like now. Onyxia had been dedicated to securing funds to establish this comprehensive magical creature reserve, a novel concept in the wizarding world. However, the original plan hadn't accounted for the inclusion of giants. Fortunately, both Katrana and Ethan possessed the financial means to adapt and accommodate the giants within the reserve. They decided to boost their investment through private funding. The capital allocated for the construction of the protected area not only expanded its boundaries, but also made it possible to accommodate the giants. Consequently, Ethan logically acquired private shares in this official protected area. Please consider supporting me with custom orders, flowers, monthly votes, reviews, and rewards. If you have votes to spare, kindly direct them my way. Your support is incredibly important to me. Chapter 475, The Sanctuary's Establishment. The sanctuary was eventually established on the Isle of Man. As donations continued to pour in, construction work began in earnest. To save money and accelerate progress, Onyxia visited Ethan's enchanted forest to seek assistance from Valenestrile. Ethan established mushroom circles between the enchanted forest and the Isle of Man Reserve, creating a direct pathway between the two locations. The Dryad Queen Valenestrile declared this place the new home for the nymphs and ordered them to take turns stationed on the Isle of Man. These nymphs not only assisted with the construction of the reserve, but also participated in its management. They became official employees of the Ministry of Magic, each receiving a formal position. Ever since their appearance in the Triwizard Tournament, rumors about dryads began to circulate in the magical world. Magical biologists were filled with curiosity and interest in this newly discovered magical creature. The news of the nymphs settling in the Isle of Man sparked widespread attention and heated discussion, serving as an official confirmation of their existence. Consequently, positions at the Isle of Man Reserve became highly sought after, attracting the attention of numerous magical biologists, including Newt Scamander, the most renowned magical biologist of our time. These scholars were eager to seize this opportunity to interact with this new humanoid race for more in-depth research. Naturally, some were drawn by the nymph's renowned charm, which surpasses even that of Velas and rivals succubi across all major magical planes. With this allure, staff recruitment for the reserve proceeded smoothly, and a professional team was quickly assembled. The nymphs' invaluable assistance significantly expedited the environmental construction of the reserve. Utilizing their natural magic, they doubled the island's forest area in just 1 week, creating a more habitable ecological environment for various magical creatures. The reserve began to house giants and gradually introduced other magical creatures, all coexisting harmoniously and forming a unique ecosystem. Furthermore, the Department for the Management and Control of Magical Creatures announced that all smuggled creatures seized in the future would be released and rewilded in protected areas. The reserve also initiated extensive artificial breeding programs for these magical creatures, thereby protecting endangered species and opening up the breeding business. At the Magical Creature Farm, applications for breeding both cultured and wild individuals were accepted to enhance genetic diversity. The magical world finally grasped the concept of a comprehensive magical creature reserve, understanding integrated protection and research, and the idea of a gene bank. These advanced wildlife protection concepts from the non-magical world were successfully introduced into the magical realm. However, the establishment of the new protected area and the introduction of giants sparked considerable debate in the magical world of the Yin Kingdom. Some expressed concerns that this might disrupt the balance of the magical world, while others viewed it as a groundbreaking effort in biological conservation. Nonetheless, this controversy was soon overshadowed by the escalating conflict between Fudge and Dumbledore. The public's focus shifted to the showdown between the two leaders, and the issues surrounding the reserve and the giants gradually faded into the background. Meanwhile, the giants Ethan brought back began their basic training under the constraints of slavery contracts. They were required to learn human language and culture to better integrate into society. In the reserve, giants were not only integrated into society but also received moral education to curb their naturally chaotic nature. Under the careful guidance of the reserve staff, the giants gradually adapted to their new lifestyle and began to form positive behavioral habits. Except for a few who were old, weak, sick, or disabled, all Hiei, Luffy giants participated in mandatory military training. This training helped them shed their previous habits of idleness, characterized by eating, sleeping, and engaging in fights for no reason, and become more self-disciplined and orderly. Through training, the giants not only enhanced their combat capabilities, but also developed a sense of teamwork and collective honor, making them less likely to engage in conflict with each other. These changes brought some relief to the older giants and filled the Ministry of Magic staff with hope for the future of the giant community. Of course, taming giants was an arduous and long-term task, and the progress made was only slight. However, motivated by the mental control exerted by servitude contracts, the physical restraints imposed by nymphs, and the promise of high salaries, the reserve staff maintained their extreme caution and patience with these rough and fierce beings. They understood that only through meticulous guidance and education could these giants gradually integrate into human society. Hagrid showed a particular interest in the new protected area, not only because his brother was living a good life there, but also because of his deep affection for all kinds of magical creatures. He had a special fondness for ferocious creatures and often visited the dragon farm where his Norberta had settled. Although it seemed she had completely forgotten him, Hagrid believed that she was only temporarily upset with him for sending her away. He was confident that one day she would accept him again and allow him to be her mom once more. Additionally, the dragon-blooded creatures in the dragon farm, such as dragon turtles and dragon lions, captivated Hagrid's interest. These creatures, with their unique species characteristics and dragon-like traits, seemed like the result of a dragon's whimsical adventure. Inspired by them, Hagrid became eager to try his hand at creating several new species himself. During this time, Hagrid enthusiastically shared his experience in raising and breeding magical creatures with the reserve staff. Although his knowledge was somewhat disorganized, with the help of his colleagues, he began to systematically compile and summarize breeding techniques and methods. These insights significantly advanced the artificial breeding techniques in the protected areas. Hagrid's expertise in this field was undeniable. His ability to create a blast-ended scroot by crossing a manticore and a fire crab was proof of his skill in cross-species hybridization. Moreover, under Ethan's patient persuasion, Hagrid also underwent job training. He learned many things he had missed after dropping out of school, beginning his transformation from a carefree gamekeeper to a professional magical biologist. Despite the challenges, Hagrid enjoyed the process, especially since Ethan promised him that upon passing the final exam, he would oversee artificial breeding projects in several protected areas. Chapter 476. 2 weeks after Ethan returned from the Ural Mountains, the library of the tower was a haven of tranquility amidst the incessant chirping of summer cicadas from the magic garden outside. Despite the hot and irritable afternoon, the room remained cool and pleasant, thanks to the thermostatic technique. Ethan was seated at the desk, his quill dancing lightly over the parchment, leaving behind smooth and neat lines of text. Hermione was by his side, engrossed in the latest edition of The Book of All Laws, her eyes scanning the pages rapidly. Every so often, a smile would play at the corners of her mouth, clearly delighted by the knowledge she was absorbing. On Ethan's other side, Zhang Chu was flipping through the latest issue of The Quibbler, her laughter lighting up the room at Xenophilius's outrageous articles. Just a few days prior, Ethan's paper, Dragon Blood, 3 new species discovered in England and research on their formation, was published in the Annals of Magical Creatures. This significant discovery validated the existence of creatures like dragon turtles and dragon lions, previously thought to be mere urban legends as reported by the Quibbler. This wasn't the first time the Quibbler had unearthed a new species amidst fantastical tales, but this validation brought immense excitement and pride to the magazine and its followers. Luna, the daughter of the Quibbler's editor-in-chief, stood quietly in front of a bookshelf. Her gaze wasn't on the books but drifted along the bookshelf's lines, as if deciphering hidden secrets, her eyes glazed over as she slipped into her fantasy world. At that moment, Ethan snapped his fingers, and the quill halted its dance. The parchment he had just finished writing floated gently in front of him. After a quick review, a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Then, stretching, he leaned back comfortably against Jiangchu's thigh. She shifted slightly but eventually settled in a position that allowed Ethan to rest more comfortably against her. "Hermione," Ethan began, responding to her earlier question, "are you asking if I'm writing to Harry?" "Yes, I saw Dumbledore's letter advising against it. He mentioned that owl messages might be intercepted." Hermione nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. "Yes, Dumbledore emphasized that point. He seems to want to protect Harry by keeping him uninformed, especially since Harry hasn't mastered occlumency yet." Ethan shrugged. "Indeed, I've mentioned before that the fragment of Voldemort's soul on Harry's forehead could create a connection between them. It's a double-edged sword. Harry can see through Voldemort's eyes when emotional, and vice versa. I've suggested Harry learn occlumency from his godfather, but progress has been slow. I suspect the soul fragment is hindering his ability to master it." Hermione raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "So what do you think should be done?" Ethan sighed. "Dumbledore's approach of keeping Harry in the dark isn't wise. We need to focus on empowering Harry, not just on shielding him." Ethan frowned slightly and said in a deep voice, "Harry has the right to know the truth. He must understand the connection between himself and Voldemort. But Professor Dumbledore must have his own considerations, right? He was one of the people who knew Harry and Voldemort best." Hermione couldn't help but express her concern. "Yes, Professor Dumbledore did know Voldemort very well," Ethan nodded. "But because of this, he should tell Harry the truth. Let Harry be prepared instead of blindly protecting him." On the other side, Zhang Chu suddenly interrupted with curiosity. "Then you mean, if we don't tell Harry the truth, he might fall into the trap Voldemort has set for him?" Ethan replied in a speculative tone. "Yes, based on Voldemort's character, once he realizes the soul connection between him and Harry, he is likely to exploit this. He might create illusions for Harry, leading him to be deceived. And Harry, not knowing the specifics, might impulsively fall into the trap." Dean frowned. "I really want to prevent this from happening, but unfortunately, I've made a promise to Professor Dumbledore, not to directly interfere with his plans for Harry's arrangements and prophecies. Therefore, no matter how worried I am, I can't tell Harry the truth directly. Zhang could sense the trouble in Ethan's words. But don't you think this is a little unfair to Harry? Hermione suddenly said. He's trapped in the Dursleys' house, completely isolated from us, and he must feel like the wizarding world has abandoned him. Ethan pondered for a moment and replied, You're right, Hermione. Professor Dumbledore is old and has weathered many storms. Perhaps it's these experiences that make him overly cautious in his decisions. Sometimes I worry he has forgotten the courage of his youth. He continued quietly, Imagine Harry's situation now. Trapped at the Dursleys for a month without any news from us. He's never had fond memories in the Muggle world, and now he must feel abandoned by the wizarding world as well. This loneliness and helplessness could make it easier for Voldemort to influence him negatively. Having said this, Ethan stood up, made a cup of black tea for the two girls, and carefully added a few more sugar cubes and milk according to their preferences. So, I think we should maintain normal contact with Harry, at least to let him know we still care about him. But in the past year, my relationship with Harry has become somewhat estranged, so I've only sent him 1 or 2 greeting letters during holidays, Ethan explained as he handed one of the cups of brewed black tea to Hermione. He then picked up the parchment on the table and raised it. It's up to you, Hermione. Do you want to consider resuming communication with Harry? After all, you correspond with him much more frequently than I do. Maybe your letter can bring him some comfort and encouragement. After listening to Ethan's words, Hermione fell into deep thought. She glanced at the parchment in Ethan's hand, then looked at the quill and the unfolded parchment in her own hand, hesitating whether to break the rules set by Principal Dumbledore. In the end, her trust in Ethan easily outweighed her obedience to Dumbledore, and the quill in her hand moved swiftly. At that moment, Luna, who had been beside her and seemed to be lost in thought, suddenly turned around and said in an ethereal voice, I guess this is what the mysterious man wants Harry to feel. Hermione was momentarily confused by Luna's comment. Why do you say that? She asked doubtfully. Luna smiled softly and replied as if singing, Let's put it this way. If I were you-know-who, I would prefer Harry to be isolated from everyone, because if he is alone, Harry won't pose much of a threat. Her words struck Hermione like lightning, instantly illuminating Luna's intent. Dumbledore, however, appeared slightly perplexed. Speaking of which, Luna, I've had a new prophecy recently. It seems Harry might be facing some trouble soon. Before Luna could slip into another trance, Ethan quickly interjected, Get your camera ready. If the weather holds up, we can scout around the Dursleys' house. If all goes well, the prophecy might come to pass around August 2nd. Fudge's mood lately has been as unpredictable as the spring weather, bright and sunny one moment. They had not only succeeded in ousting Dumbledore from his position as the president of the International Federation of Wizards, but had also stripped him of his seat in the Wizengamot, the highest wizarding court. Now, their sights were set on removing Dumbledore's Order of Merlin, first class, a medal symbolizing the highest honor. Fudge was convinced that soon, no one would be willing to believe Dumbledore's words anymore. People are always blind, lazy to think, and easily led, Fudge mused with a sneer. As long as we keep bombarding them with information through the newspapers, those wizards who are unaware of the truth will be swayed to believe that Dumbledore is old and confused. He tapped the table light, a cold gleam in his eyes. The next step is to deal with that boy, Harry Potter. We need to find a way to silence him and completely discredit him, so that people will think he is a delusional lunatic. Fudge was well aware that as long as they controlled the narrative, it wouldn't be long before no one believed in Voldemort's return. After all, they themselves were reluctant to accept this terrifying truth. At that moment, a knock sounded at the door of the minister's office. "Come in," Fudge called out. The door swung open, and Percy Weasley entered, out of breath. His face was pale, and sweat dotted his forehead, clearly having rushed over. "Minister, we have a problem," Percy announced, gasping for air. "What's the matter, Weasley?" Fudge frowned upon seeing Percy's disheveled state, disliking his panicked appearance. Percy took a deep breath, attempting to steady his emotions, before hurriedly explaining, "Minister, it's about that giant issue again. They've published it in the free gossip tabloid Rumor." He placed the magazine in front of Fudge and quickly flipped to a specific page. Fudge's expression darkened as he scanned the article. His eyes widened in shock, and he clenched his fists, slamming them down on the table with a loud bang. "Bastards, how dare they!" he exclaimed, standing abruptly. He glared at the magazine, as if wishing he could tear it to shreds. Chapter 477, The Shocking Revelation. The headline of this issue of the magazine featured an exclusive interview with Madame Maxime. In the interview, Madame Maxime recounted the adventurous journey she and Hagrid had recently undertaken to the Ural Mountains. Unexpectedly, they stumbled upon traces of Death Eaters. Through a covert investigation and tracking, they were astonished to discover that these Death Eaters had formed an alliance with the giant tribe residing deep within the Ural Mountains. This revelation sent shockwaves through the magical world, linking the incident to Minister Fudge's recent refusal of Professor Dumbledore's proposal to negotiate peace with the Giants, as well as the abrupt relocation of a group of Giants to the Isle of Man Reserve. The news spread like wildfire, causing widespread uproar. "How can this be?" Minister Fudge, holding the magazine, trembled slightly. "How dare they publish such information?" "Minister, according to my findings, Remus Lupin recently acquired a portion of the shares in Rumor," Percy Weasley reported respectfully. "Lupin?" Minister Fudge frowned, puzzled. How could he afford to invest in a magazine? He quickly suspected foul play. Sirius Black must be behind this. Pacing angrily in his office, Minister Fudge suddenly stopped and roared at Percy. "Issue a bounty notice for Sirius Black and Remus Lupin immediately. The charge is disturbing social order." His anger was palpable, his words nearly hitting Percy in the face. Percy, dodging the spittle, cautiously reminded him, "Minister, I'm afraid that might not be appropriate." He wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Although Lupin is a shareholder, he isn't the editor-in-chief. We lack direct evidence of their influence over the magazine's content. Even if we apprehend Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, it's likely they'll deny any involvement." "Do you have any better ideas?" Fudge demanded, his gaze intense. Percy suggested, "Perhaps we could discredit the magazine, make it seem like a joke." Fudge, clearly dissatisfied, asked, "Can't we just ban it?" Percy patiently explained, "Banning it might only heighten public curiosity and defiance. People will wonder what truths the magazine revealed and why the Ministry is so intent on suppressing it. This could exacerbate the situation." Fudge, irritable, dismissed Percy's advice. "I want you to use all available means to mitigate this issue. Do you understand?" "Understood, Minister. I'll handle it to the best of my ability," Percy replied, standing tall. Fudge, eyeing Percy, offered a potential promotion as incentive. "Show me your abilities and talents, and I'll consider promoting you." Percy, moved yet composed, thanked the minister for his trust. In that moment, Fudge was overwhelmed with emotions. Rejecting Dumbledore's proposal had seemed logical, yet the unexpected alliance between the Death Eaters and the Giants, now public knowledge, was a direct affront. What frustrated him further was Madame Maxime's compelling account of the incident, supported by photographs of the scene. The images, showing giants alongside men in black robes, their menacing and fearsome appearances, left no room for doubt. The photographs, one taken in a reserve on the Isle of Man, depicted a group of tall giants identical to those in another image. This evidence seemed to underscore Dumbledore's foresight, contrasting sharply with the Ministry of Magic's earlier dismissal of his warnings. The public's perception of the Ministry had significantly deteriorated, as they were now forced to address the very issue they had previously mocked. Fudge, feeling the pressure, saw the photo from the Isle of Man Reserve as undeniable proof that validated Mrs. Maxim's statements. The appearance of these giants seemed to officially support her claims, leaving Fudge with no ground for denial. Attempting to regain his composure, Fudge turned to Percy with a resigned tone, instructing him to contact Bones to file a formal complaint against the Gallic Ministry of Magic for Alam Maxim's unfounded accusations. Percy, pausing before leaving, tentatively suggested investigating the Isle of Man Magical Creatures Sanctuary and the Department for the Management and Control of Magical Creatures. Fudge, however, was hesitant, acknowledging the lack of concrete evidence against Miss Presto and the need for careful deliberation. Aware of the political adversaries waiting for an opportunity to exploit his vulnerabilities, especially after his confrontations with Dumbledore, Fudge was cautious about making any hasty decisions that could further alienate his colleagues. As Percy was about to leave, Fudge suddenly inquired about Remus Lupin's status as a werewolf, hinting at a new strategy to discredit him through the Daily Prophet, emphasizing his past connection with Hogwarts. Percy promptly noted Fudge's instructions and left to carry them out. Shortly after, Umbridge entered Fudge's office, her voice tinged with feigned concern as they discussed the potential threat posed by Remus Lupin, based on rumors and his past role at Hogwarts. Fudge, expressing his disapproval of Dumbledore's decision to employ someone with giant blood as a professor, questioned the safety and responsibility towards the students. This conversation highlighted the Ministry's growing desperation to undermine Dumbledore and his allies, revealing a deep-seated fear and bias against those deemed different or dangerous. Mrs. Maxim and Umbridge were in the same group. Umbridge appeared to sense something, her lips curling into a slight, proud smile. The current state of Hogwarts is indeed concerning. Headmaster Dumbledore always seems to be in a daze, and his decisions often leave people baffled, she remarked. Fudge finally disclosed his reason for seeking out Umbridge. Speaking of which, it appears that Dumbledore has never managed to find a suitable defense against the dark arts professor. Perhaps you could go to Hogwarts and help elevate the declining educational standards there. Chapter 478. Of course, Fudge was well aware of the kind of person Umbridge was and her notorious reputation. However, he believed that as long as one could efficiently complete their tasks, they would be considered an excellent subordinate. Recently, Fudge realized that trustworthy individuals within the Ministry of Magic were scarce. Umbridge, though overjoyed by this recognition, maintained a reserved demeanor and said, "Oh, Minister, you really think highly of me. However, I'm concerned that Principal Dumbledore might not agree. I will discuss this matter with him, and I believe he will accommodate my request," Fudge confidently stated. After all, Hogwarts needs to evolve and embrace new educational concepts and methods. Fudge was acutely aware that the Ministry had long sought to place its personnel at Hogwarts, a move Dumbledore had consistently resisted. But this time, Fudge believed he had found a compelling reason that could persuade Dumbledore to compromise. "Don't worry, Minister," Umbridge quickly assured him. "I will not disappoint you." Fudge nodded slightly, then added, "Dolores, I have another important task for you." He paused for emphasis. "I need you to closely monitor Harry Potter's activities. Should he dare to use magic unlawfully, you must report it to me immediately." A flicker of understanding appeared in Umbridge's eyes as she promptly replied, "I understand, Minister. I'll remain vigilant and ensure no detail about Harry Potter escapes my notice." Fudge looked at her with satisfaction, knowing Umbridge had grasped his underlying motive, a trap for Harry Potter. If Harry were caught using magic outside of school, it would provide a valid reason for Dumbledore to dismiss him. This strategy would not only diminish Dumbledore's influence at Hogwarts, but also serve as a stern lesson for Harry Potter. Umbridge respectfully nodded and left Fudge's office, fully comprehending his intentions and seeing an opportunity for her own advancement. She knew how to skillfully align with Fudge's desires and leverage the Minister of Magic's power for her benefit. More importantly, she understood how to present herself as one of Fudge's few trusted confidants. By gaining Fudge's trust, Umbridge knew she was closer to securing a higher position within the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters. Before turning 30, she had already been appointed as the director of the Office for the Prohibition of Abuse of Magic. After Jaina assumed leadership of the Legal Enforcement Department, Umbridge was transferred to the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters as the deputy director, a position she had held for many years, accumulating extensive skills, tactics, and insights. Umbridge recognized that securing a key role in influencing Hogwarts would significantly aid her career advancement. However, she also understood that supporting Fudge in handling Harry Potter was a crucial prerequisite for this ambition. Fudge's recent remarks reminded Umbridge of Harry's previous violations of the International Federation of Wizards' Statute of Secrecy. If he transgressed again, the Ministry would have a legitimate reason to expel him. Umbridge believed it was imprudent to passively wait for Harry to err. Instead, she could proactively compel him to use magic outside of school. With Fudge granting her control over the Dementors, Umbridge was confident that a well-executed plan, leaving no traces, would prevent Fudge from questioning why the Dementors targeted Harry Potter. Instead, he would welcome the chance to remove the troublesome boy from Hogwarts. That summer was the hottest Harry had ever experienced. The once vibrant green grasslands of the Muggles had turned yellow and brittle under the relentless drought, as if years had sapped them of their vitality. The drought was so severe that even the use of watering hoses was strictly prohibited. This land, once teeming with life, now struggled to survive under the scorching sun. Residents of Privet Drive, who usually spent their leisure time cleaning their favo, right cars, or manicuring their lawns, found both pastimes impossible due to the ban. Left with no choice, they retreated into their cool houses, opening windows wide in the vain hope of catching a non-existent breeze to alleviate the stifling heat. However, in this street simmering with heat, Harry was the only one who remained outdoors. He lay flat on his back in the flower bed outside No. 4 Privet Drive. The soil was dry and cracked, with a few stubborn grasses struggling to survive in the crevices. Harry closed his eyes, as if listening to whispers in the wind or eavesdropping on news from another world. He preferred to endure the scorching sun and mosquito bites rather than return to the suffocating house to face unwarranted accusations and strange looks. What made him feel even more uneasy was that since he received a letter from Ron at the beginning of the holiday, he had been cut off from all contact with the wizarding world. It felt like being thrown into an endless dark abyss, devoid of even a faint trace of light. After Sirius took him back to the Muggle world, he left their temporary residence on Privet Drive under various pretexts and went unknown, leaving Harry alone. Late at night, Harry would often sit up from his bed and read old magic books over and over again. Only within these pages could he find a semblance of comfort to calm his inner turmoil, reassuring him that the world was real and not a dream. However, when the pages were turned and the spells recited, he was still faced with an empty room and endless darkness. The feeling of depression and loss would engulf him like a tide, leaving him unable to breathe, struggle, or escape. Harry stared boredly at the sky above him. The sky was a beautiful, almost transparent blue under the scorching sun, with occasional white clouds lazily drifting by. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he had spotted something unusual. He sat up suddenly and instinctively covered his eyes with his hands. In the distance, a small black dot flew across the sky. Harry's heartbeat accelerated instantly. He turned around to confirm that his owl, Hedwig, was still sleeping in the bedroom. Then, this object on the horizon was... He jumped up excitedly, but unexpectedly hit his head hard on the open window of the Dursleys' house. There was a loud bang, followed by Aunt Petunia's frightened screams from inside the room. Harry felt as if his head had been split in half, the pain causing his vision to blur and tears to well up involuntarily. Ignoring the blurred vision, he shook his body and ran towards the street. This decision was undoubtedly wise, for not long after he ran off, he heard Uncle Vernon's angry roar. Harry shook his head vigorously, trying to clear his vision, while desperately waving to the owl in the sky, as if greeting a long-lost relative. Fortunately, the weather was hot, and pedestrians on the street were hiding indoors to escape the heat. No one witnessed this scene, or they would have surely thought him mad. When the owl finally flew closer, Harry's joy was indescribable. He recognized it as Ethan's owl, Hemer, flying towards him with wings spread wide. Gently stroking Hemer's head, Harry felt a long-lost sense of kindness and warmth. He had finally reconnected with that world. Eagerly, he untied the 2 letters attached to the owl's feet. Harry's excitement was palpable as he began to read, once again feeling a part of the magical world he had missed so dearly. Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope, feeling its contents weigh heavily in his hand. Carefully opening it, 3 pieces of paper floated out gently, 2 letters and a photo. His attention was immediately drawn to the photo. Hermione, Zhangqiu, Luna, and Ethan stood in front of a majestic and gorgeous castle, their smiles bright and warm, radiating a sense of happiness that seemed to reach Harry's heart directly through the photo. Harry couldn't help but smile unconsciously as he looked at them, noticing even his own crush in the photo, which hinted at a potentially ambiguous relationship with Ethan. Harry first opened Ethan's letter, envy evident on his face. How he wished he could be like Ethan, spending every day with his close friends and freely using magic. Although Ethan's letter didn't mention any news about the wizarding world, for Harry, just being able to reconnect with it was thrilling. Next, Harry opened Hermione's letter, his brows furrowing slightly. For some reason, I couldn't get in touch with you when the vacation started. Hermione's handwriting was as neat and strong as ever, but Harry could sense the apology and concern woven between the lines. He knew Hermione well enough to understand that if something significant hadn't prevented her, she would never have missed contacting him. You should review your homework carefully. After all, we will soon face the ordinary wizarding level exam. This is very important, not only for our academic performance, but also because it affects the kind of jobs we can apply for in the future. I remember you want to be an auror, so you should pay extra attention to defense against the dark arts, potions, and charms classes. True to form, Hermione focused on studying and exams. Harry found himself both amused and slightly annoyed by her single-mindedness. You can learn a lot of knowledge during the summer vacation, Hermione encouraged in her letter. As long as we get good results, we can choose the NT subjects we need next year. This way, we are one step closer to realizing our dreams. The ordinary wizarding level exam still seemed far off to Harry, but he carefully folded the letter and placed it in his pocket along with the photo. Update. Additional update. Please support me with flowers, monthly votes, comments, and rewards. If you have any votes, please give them to me. This is really important to me. Chapter 479, The End of the Hottest Summer Day. The hottest day of summer was finally drawing to a close. The sunset, resembling spilled blood, gradually painted the sky red. The clouds on the horizon appeared as if scorched, emitting a faint red glow. On Magnolia Crescent Street, at the very end of Magnolia Road, stood a playground, silent and seemingly forgotten, with its gates firmly shut. Suddenly, 4 figures materialized outside the amusement park. A low-pitched female voice announced, "Allaho Cave opens." "Harry should be inside," Ethan remarked, stepping on the dry grass beneath his feet as he peered into the amusement park. "We lingered in that arcade too long, now we must hurry." The decision to not send Oriana, but instead to personally follow Harry, stemmed from their desire to seize the opportunity for a leisurely stroll on Privet Drive, indulging in some shopping and relaxation at the amusement park. The amusement park, much like the surrounding streets, lay deserted. An invisible hand opened the park's gate, which closed again after a few seconds. "Where is he?" Ethan inquired, pointing ahead. The group halted, not moving any further. Despite the dim light, following the direction of Ethan's finger revealed a boy with unkempt hair and round glasses sitting alone on a swing. He casually held onto one of the chains, his gaze fixed on the ground, embodying a sense of melancholy. With each breeze, the swing moved slightly, echoing the boy's solitude. Suddenly, he looked up, his hand gently caressing the scar on his forehead, his expression tightening as if he was grappling with some indescribable discomfort. "His scar is hurting again," Hermione whispered, concern evident in her voice. Harry, lost in thought on the swing, remained unaware of Ethan, Hermione, Zhangqiu, and Luna, who were invisibly trailing him from a distance, keeping a vigilant watch over their surroundings. As night fell, it brought with it a sultry softness. The air, heavy with the scent of warm hay, lent a pastoral charm to the darkening sky. Silence enveloped the area, broken only occasionally by the distant hum of vehicles outside the playground's fence. This tranquility was shattered by a sudden burst of noise. Harry's head snapped up as he tried to locate the source. The surrounding streets, bathed in the glow of streetlights, were cast in a hazy light and shadow. A group of figures meandered through the amusement park, one of them loudly humming a crude ballad, eliciting laughter from the others. The clinking sound of several expensive cars being hastily driven away accompanied their laughter. Leading the group was a particularly noticeable figure, Harry's cousin, Dudley Dursley. Surrounded by friends, Dudley swaggered towards home. Ethan remembered seeing him as a child. The transformation after several years was astonishing. Gone was the chubby boy, replaced by a muscular young man. However, they failed to notice Harry, concealed in the shadows. He sat quietly on the swing, watching them depart. After Dudley bid farewell to his friends, he emerged from beneath the trees, preparing to head home quietly. Having recently received letters from his friends, Harry felt his anger subside significantly. He had no desire for conflict with the bothersome Dudley. He merely wished for a peaceful night. Contrary to his hopes, Dudley, initially strolling leisurely and humming a tune, quickened his pace due to a sudden change in the weather, trotting past Harry. In a narrow alley they had just passed, Dudley caught sight of Harry ahead of him. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes as he followed Harry into the alley, which was deserted and quiet. Because there were no streetlights, the alley was significantly darker than the two streets it connected. It was enclosed by a garage wall on one side and a high fence on the other, creating a closed environment that made the footsteps of Harry and Dudley sound particularly dull. Ethan and his three companions followed at a distance, stopping at the entrance of the alley. They watched Harry and Dudley with vigilance, ready to respond to any emergencies. "Why do you hide when you see me?" Dudley taunted with a smirk, clenching his fists. "Did your murderous godfather really abandon you? Those damn owls haven't been here for a long time, and your so-called friends have ignored you, right?" The mention of Sirius ignited a surge of anger in Harry's heart. He glared at Dudley, his wand aimed directly at Dudley's heart. "He's only been away for a while, and you dare to provoke me like this?" Harry's voice was cold and firm. "I'm warning you, don't ever say such things again. Do you understand?" At that moment, Dudley shuddered as if a stream of cold air had pierced through him. He gasped, his body feeling as though it had been drenched in cold water. The dark blue night sky, once full of stars, turned pitch black. All light, the stars, the moon, and the dim streetlights at both ends of the alley, vanished. The surrounding sounds disappeared, and the distant rumble of cars and the rustling of nearby leaves were all silenced by the encompassing darkness. It was as if a giant black hand had smothered the alley, enveloping everything in deep, silent darkness. Under this oppressive shroud, they could see nothing, only sensing each other's terrified breathing. What are you doing?" Dudley's voice trembled with fear. "Stop! Let everything return to normal." "I did nothing," Harry shouted back sternly. "Shut up and don't move." I can't see. I'm blind," Dudley cried out in panic. "I told you to shut up." Harry's voice echoed in the darkness. Amidst the quarrel, a strange figure quietly emerged, floating above the ground and moving silently towards Harry. The figure wore a robe, with no feet or legs visible, and its face was obscured as if swallowed by darkness. Its movements had an eerie rhythm, slowly consuming the surrounding shadows. Hermione, nervously clutching her wand, kept her eyes fixed on the hooded figure. However, Ethan's voice echoed in her heart. "Hermione, you promised not to act. We must let Harry handle this. You can save him once, but we can't always be there when he's in danger. You have to trust him. The prophecy tells me he will manage to cast the Patronus charm and drive away the Dementors." Hermione nodded silently in the darkness, taking a deep breath to calm herself. Suddenly, Dudley threw a punch at Harry, catching him off guard and knocking him to the ground. The wand slipped from Harry's hand. In a moment of panic, Harry scrambled to his feet and remotely cast the Lumos spell. A weak glow illuminated the darkness, guiding Harry to his wand. As he picked it up, the Dementor lunged at him, its black maw emitting a chilling, silent scream. Harry felt the cold and fear rapidly consuming his soul. Clutching the wand tightly, his knuckles white from the strain, he took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. Inwardly panicking, Ethan shouted, "Call to God for protection." A stream of silver smoke emerged from the tip of his wand, gradually forming a vague silver figure. As the spell was invoked, the silver smoke slowly condensed into an indistinct shape. Though its form was uncertain, the light it emitted exuded a warm and reassuring force. The Dementor's movements slowed down significantly, as if it was intimidated by this power, and its originally ghastly face now displayed a hint of fear. However, the spell didn't fully take effect, and the Dementor continued its advance toward Ethan, its slimy, scabbed gray hands reaching out. Witnessing this, Ethan's heart raced, and he stumbled backward involuntarily. Panic clouded his mind, making it difficult for him to focus on casting the spell again. "Call to God for protection," he cried out once more. His voice sounded faint and distant, as though it came from another realm. Another stream of silver smoke sprayed from the wand tip, but this time it was thinner and weaker than before. Ethan felt drained. He realized he could no longer muster the strength to cast the spell again. Chapter 480. Hermione stood to the side, her anxiety palpable. She gripped her wand tightly, yet remained motionless. She understood that in this moment, her only option was to trust that Harry would prevail. Suddenly, the distinct sound of a camera shutter clicking broke the tense silence. Luna, seizing the moment, captured the scene of the Dementor's assault on Harry and its attack on Dudley, a muggle, with a satisfied smile. Harry, momentarily puzzled by the sound, had little time to ponder its source, as he was in the midst of fending off a Dementor. Gasping for air, Harry's mind raced through thoughts of Ron and the recent letters he had received from Ethan and Hermione. It was the thought of Ron that finally ignited a powerful emotion within him. With renewed determination, he waved his wand, his voice clear and forceful, as if to expel the fear gripping his heart. "Call to God for protection." As the spell was cast, a magnificent silver stag burst forth from the tip of Harry's wand. Bathed in moonlight, its muscular form gleamed, and its antlers, sharp as swords, pierced directly into the Dementor's heart. Caught off guard, the Dementor was propelled backwards. Against the stag's might, the Dementor's sinister form appeared fragile, as insubstantial as the darkness around them. The stag then charged at the other Dementor, attacking Dudley, driving it away with such force that it fled like a startled bat. As the Dementors retreated, the moon and stars, along with the street lamps, seemed to shine brighter. A gentle breeze swept through the alley, as if nature itself was celebrating the victory. The sound of rustling leaves and the distant hum of cars filled the air, ordinary, yet now incredibly comforting. Dudley lay on the ground, curled up and trembling. Observing him, Harry felt a whirlwind of emotions. He bent down to check on Dudley, assessing if he could stand. It was then that he heard the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. Harry instinctively tightened his grip on his wand, turning to face the potential threat. However, to his surprise, the figure that emerged was none other than Mrs. Fig. "Mrs. Fig?" Harry exclaimed, taken aback. Mrs. Fig, Harry's peculiar old neighbor, stood before them, out of breath. Her gray and white hair had escaped her hairnet, and a net bag jingled at her wrist, filled with mysterious items. Her feet nearly slipped from her tartan slippers, adding a touch of humor to her appearance. Harry attempted to conceal his wand, but Mrs. Fig immediately noticed. "Stop hiding it, silly boy," she exclaimed, her voice high-pitched yet forceful. "What if more of them are lurking nearby? You'll only draw more attention." "You did wonderfully, Harry," she continued, her tone softening. "You drove those Dementors away. Oh, I must confront Mundungus Fletcher." Harry realized in that moment that he had misjudged his neighbor. He had always assumed she was merely an ordinary muggle, yet her knowledge of wizarding terms suggested otherwise. Mrs. Fig, sensing Harry's confusion, revealed herself as a squib and explained that Dumbledore had tasked her with watching over him. She also warned Harry of the potential dangers he faced. Together, they helped Dudley, who was still in a daze, back to his home. "We can head back now. He'll be safe," Ethan remarked, watching Mrs. Fig lead Harry and Dudley away. He then turned to the three girls accompanying him. They nodded in agreement and followed Ethan back to the tower. Ethan first distributed chocolates, puffs, cookies, and other sweets among them. "Have some dessert. It might help you feel better," he suggested. Zhang Chusu eagerly accepted a piece of chocolate pudding and took a bite. The sweetness filled her mouth, offering a temporary reprieve from the tension. Though they hadn't been directly affected by the Dementors, the dopamine from the sweets provided a momentary relief. Nerves were high as they discussed the recent events. Dementors are creatures managed by the Ministry of Magic. Their presence here is clearly not by chance. Han analyzed, suggesting a deeper conspiracy at play. Hermione quickly grasped his point, but Jiangchu and Luna were still piecing things together, puzzled about his certainty and questioning if there was any evidence to support his claim. Ethan elaborated. Dementors typically operate under the Ministry's orders. Their appearance was likely orchestrated by someone with an agenda. I suspect Fudge and his associates might be attempting to exploit Harry's use of the Patronus charm in front of Muggles to bring him to trial. Jiangchu's expression darkened at the thought. This is despicable. How could they target Harry like this? Hermione, however, was concerned about another aspect. Traditionally, Dementors fall under the jurisdiction of the Magical Law Commission. Could this attack impact Lady Jaina, given her responsibility for such matters? Your concerns are valid. Dementors should indeed be under Jaina's control, Ethan confirmed, catching Hermione's attention with his use of should. She pressed for clarification, leading Ethan to reveal, indeed, this situation doesn't involve Jaina. Fudge has been reluctant to relinquish control over the Dementors, seeking to consolidate power. He believes that only through force can he counter the Aurors, who are largely aligned with us. So, during the negotiations following the Crouch incident, Jaina conceded control of the Dementors to Fudge? Hermione inquired softly. Yes, Ethan nodded, his disdain for Dementors evident. For the greater good, Jaina handed them over to Fudge, and I, sharing her distaste for such creatures, supported her decision. Hermione, piecing together the implications, wondered aloud why Fudge would risk the ire of the wizarding community. Ethan's response was laced with scorn. Fudge has a confidant, Dolores Umbridge. Have you heard of her? Hermione, being Muggle-born and outside Ethan's inner circle, was unfamiliar with the name. However, Zhang Chu, from a wizarding family, recognized it, describing Umbridge as the pink-clad woman often seen with Fudge at the Ministry. Yes, that's her, Ethan confirmed. Umbridge is Fudge's right hand. She's adept at anticipating his wishes and currently serves as the Deputy Director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, a clear sign of Fudge's favor. The control over the Dementors was also entrusted to her by Fudge. Ethan's tone grew serious as he shared a revelation. After returning from the Ural Mountains, I had a premonition that Dementors would target Harry. It appears my intuition was correct. He admitted to using the prophecy as a pretext to flaunt his foresight, also mentioning how he had Percy indirectly confirm the likelihood of Umbridge's involvement. Hermione gasped, realizing the gravity of the situation. So, the Dementor attack on Harry was likely orchestrated by Umbridge in secret? Very possible, Ethan stated gravely. Umbridge is currying favor at the Ministry and undermining Professor Dumbledore's supporters. The Dementor's attack aligns with her strategy. The attack on Harry was likely orchestrated by her. It's even possible that Fudge himself was in the dark about the attack. Hermione's heart sank further. If this is truly the case, then Harry is too innocent. How could they treat an underage wizard in such a manner? Jiang Chu expressed his concern. Will Fudge and the others really exploit Harry's use of the Patronus charm in front of Muggles to their advantage? Will he actually be taken to court? Ethan remained silent for a moment before slowly responding. Indeed, Fudge and his associates have always been looking for opportunities to undermine Harry and Professor Dumbledore. I strongly suspect they orchestrated this incident precisely to fabricate such an excuse. Hermione, after swallowing a mouthful of chocolate cauldron, frowned. Isn't it clearly stated in Article 7? Under special circumstances, underage wizards are permitted to use magic in front of Muggles. Harry was facing an attack by 2 Dementors at the time. It was a matter of life and death, fully justifying the use of magic under special circumstances. She then suggested, can we print out these photos now and give them directly to Harry so he can use them to prove his innocence? Ethan gently set down his black teacup and shook his head. Hermione, I understand your intentions. However, we must proceed with even greater caution. We cannot give these photos to Harry just yet. Why? Hermione asked, puzzled. If we were to present the photos now, Harry could indeed prove his innocence, Ethan explained. But that would only be a temporary solution. Fudge and his allies are powerful and fully capable of suppressing the news. After all, The Daily Prophet is under the Ministry of Magic's control, and they would likely accuse Harry of lying. Of course, in such a scenario, if the Quibbler were to publish counter-reports, relying on the public opinion tools at our disposal, we could indeed challenge Fudge. However, we can't do that. We've reached an agreement with Fudge long ago. It's not our place to openly confront Fudge on Harry's behalf. That's Dumbledore's responsibility. If we want to help Harry, it must be done in secret. Hermione, though somewhat reluctant, understood that this was the most prudent approach at the moment. She bit her lip and asked, "Then what should we do now?" Among the girls, she had the closest relationship with Harry and was most concerned about his situation. All we need to do now is wait. Wait for them to escalate the matter and bring it to everyone's attention, Ethan said with a slight smile, exuding confidence. Then, during the trial, we'll use these key photos as physical evidence and discreetly hand them over to Sirius. I believe he will use these photos to discredit Fudge and the others. By that time, faced with unexpected evidence, they won't have enough time to sway public opinion. Although Hermione was not fond of these scheming tactics, she still nodded in reluctant agreement. I understand, Ethan. We'll follow your lead.